Chapter 7, Ownership of Real Estate. In this chapter, we're going to describe different forms of ownership and explain the differences between condominiums, cooperatives, and timeshares. We're going to learn what these things are. In the last chapter, we were talking about estates and land, which described that when you have ownership, what kind of ownership do you have? Can you leave it in a will to somebody? Is it based on a restriction, or are there no restrictions on that ownership? In this chapter, we're talking about the types of ownership if you own it by yourself or if you own it with someone else. How do you own it? Well, if you own it by yourself, it's called tenancy in severalty. It comes from the root word, not the root word here is not several, it's actually sever, where your interests are severed from all others. Your interests are cut off from all others. This is tenancy in severalty. That is, the root word is sever. Sever means cut. So your interests are cut off from all others. It's sole ownership by one person or entity. What's an entity? An entity is an artificial person for taxation purposes, like a LLC or a corporation, right? You could own real estate in the name of that entity. But it is sole ownership by one person or entity is tenancy in severalty. The owner is free to devise the property. What does that mean? It means you could leave it in a will to heirs or to anyone you like in that will, heirs or devisees. So let's highlight sole ownership or tenancy in severalty. The term severalty means all interests are severed from others, and when that person dies, title to the property will pass to their heirs or devisees. Good. All right. You got this chart on the next page here. Oh, actually, this screenshot right here. Let me see if I have an updated screenshot for this. Okay, I updated the screenshot here from this version of the book. This is still page 119. But as you can see, they made it a little bit wordier, so they wrote sole ownership or tenancy in severalty. Term severalty means all interests are severed from others. When that person dies, title to the property will pass to their heirs or devisees. That's the person named in a will. Or if there are no heirs that are found, no natural blood relatives, those heirs, the owner dies intestate without a will, the property will eventually escheat back to the state. It will revert to the state. Not to the state. State never owned it. So it reverts to the state. And then we got this chart over here again on page 120, the next page. Here, I want you to write at the top in capital letters and highlight it, or put the highlights first so that you don't smudge your ink. Put a highlight here and then a highlight here, and then write OR above giving and EE above receiving. So we have the root word or the product, as they explain. As long as you know what the root word means, you could figure out who the players are. So devise is leaving a property to someone in a will. So the devisor, words that end in OR, is the person who's giving whatever the root word is. They're giving the property that's left in the will. And EE is the one that's receiving it. So they're receiving whatever is left in the will that you're giving away. When you sell a property or give it away, you grant your ownership to someone else. So the grantor is the owner who's giving the property or selling it, and the grantee is the buyer, the person who's receiving it. Remember, a legacy is your personal property that you've amassed during your lifetime. And therefore, the legator is the one whose property it is, and the legatee is the one who you're giving it to. A lease is a little more of a lengthy explanation, but a lease is where an owner intentionally transfers all of their rights to a tenant who is going to occupy their premises. So an owner voluntarily transfers all of their rights to their property to a tenant who's going to occupy their premises for a limited period of time as defined in the lease. The lease is the document that gives the tenants these rights. And once the tenant has those rights, they are contingent upon the terms of the lease. So as long as the tenant doesn't violate the terms of the lease, they have all the rights that the landlord imparted on them. The owner of the property imparted on them. So the lessor is the one who gives the lease. That's the landlord, the owner of the property, and the lessee is the one who receives that lease. Now, when it comes to a mortgage, you guys know what a mortgage is? Anybody here know what a mortgage is? You ever hear that term before?
Yes.
Yes.
What is it?
Your monthly payments for the house.
Okay, let me get some other opinions. Go ahead, give me another opinion.
Loan?
Principal you owe for your home.
Someone else?
I said a loan. I don't know.
See, that's the thing. We've been so accustomed to even banks misusing this word that we forget what it even means because we're never taught. When you say mortgage, people often think of a loan, the money, right? But that's not what a mortgage is. That's what a mortgage loan is. A loan is the money. A mortgage is a promise to pay. In exchange, the lender gives money. Banks don't make promises, they make loans. The mortgagor is the borrower. They're promising the lender that if you lend me your money, I will pay you back according to the terms in the note. There are multiple documents in a mortgage in order to get the loan. You have the mortgage itself, which is the promise to pay. Lender, lend me your money and I promise to pay you back according to the terms in the note. The note is the financial instrument that makes you personally liable for paying back that money. And it lays out all the terms, how much you borrowed, what the interest rate was, the frequency of payments, etc. So the mortgage is the borrower. That's the best way to remember it, and you don't need to think about it. Otherwise, you got to remember the story that a mortgage is a promise to pay. Banks don't make promises, they make loans. It's the borrower that makes the promise, and then in exchange, the lender will lend them their money, yada, yada, yada. Or you can remember that the word mortgage has two O's in it, and the word mortgagee has two E's in it, just like borrower and lender. Two O's, two O's. Two E's in mortgagee, two E's in lender, two O's in mortgagor, two O's in borrower. But still, that makes me think too much. So I just like to remember to sing, the mortgagor is the borrower. Right? That's the way to remember it. Sounds silly, but my annoying voice will be stuck in your head when you guys take exams. Who's the mortgagor? The borrower. The mortgagor is the borrower. Now I don't need to remember any long, lengthy story. I just remember Victor was singing to me, the mortgagor is the borrower. And that my annoying voice gets stuck in, okay? Hopefully. Because this way you don't need to think about it. Because I doubt they're going to ask you a question straight out. Who is the mortgagor? I mean, they may, but I doubt it. They're probably going to have these terms mortgagor, mortgagee, and some long question that's wordier than it needs to be. And you need to know who the players are right away to be able to translate this stuff in your head so that you could follow the bouncing ball and understand what the question is asking of you. So they'll use a lot of these terminology in the questions, and you need to know the terms in order to know what the question's asking of you. You follow? That's why we're teaching you so many of these terms. They're not just going to be like, what is this? What is that? They may, but it could also be just a bunch of these terms be added into a long-winded question. And if you don't know the terms, you're not going to know what the question's asking. So, who is the
The borrower.
The borrower.
borrower? The mortgage is the borrower. That is correct. All right, let's continue on. There's a list of more here, but those are the important ones we need to know. So let's move on. All right, so I made another list like that, which is pretty short and sweet, just talks about devise, grant, legacy, lease, and mortgage. And I have an explanation here what a lease is and what the mortgage is, like I've explained when we went over it on the previous slide. Okay, so look, here's an example of lenders even misusing the term mortgage in this commercial, which I recorded. So it's, remember, the mortgage is the promise to pay. It's made by the borrower to pay back the lender according to the terms in the note. Banks don't make promises, they make loans. You don't go to a lender to get a mortgage. You give the lender a mortgage. In exchange, they give you a loan. Anybody ever see this commercial from Lending Tree?
Looking sharp, Len. Who's the lucky lady?
I'm going to the bank to discuss a mortgage.
See, you need a loan, you put on a suit, you go crawling to the bank. This is how I dress to get a mortgage.
When you don't get a mortgage, you're the one that's giving the mortgage. It's a promise to pay. You see, even lenders misuse these terms on their commercials. So it's only natural that you're not going to know what it means if the lender's misusing the term, right?
I just go to Lending Tree. I calculate how much home I can afford. I get multiple offers to compare side by side. And the best part is, the banks come crawling to me.
Everything you need to get a better mortgage. Clothing optional. Lending Tree. When banks compete, you win.
Okay.
Awkward.
Awkward. All right, so here are the forms of ownership we're going to discuss in this chapter. We discussed the first one, which is sole ownership by one person or entity, and that is tenancy and severalty. We're also going to learn about tenancy by the entirety, which is ownership by married couples. Tenancy in common, which is the default form of ownership when you have two or more people or entities that own property together. Or joint tenancy, when you want an alternative form of ownership when there's two or more people that own a property, not married to each other, and they own a property together. They could, instead of tenancy in common or tenancy in entirety, to have, or instead of tenancy in common, to get a joint tenancy. And we're going to discuss how to create joint tenancies. What are the four unities in common to have a joint tenancy? How to terminate joint tenancies, and the only benefit to having a joint tenancy. Now, even though we're going to discuss all of these things, and I'm going to teach them to you, and you're going to study your little hearts out so that you're going to know them inside and out for exam, unfortunately, real estate licensees should never advise someone as to what form of ownership they should take, because that would be legal advice, and we're not attorneys. So if they give you a question on exam, be careful on how the question is worded. If they give you this long-winded scenario of a question and they ask you, how would you advise, or how should the licensee advise them what form of ownership to take? That's a trick question, the way it's worded. Even though there may be an answer option there that's perfect and you know you want to select it because you know what it is, write none of the above.
Yep. Answer supposed to none of the above.
None of the above, because the way they worded the question is asking how you, the real estate licensee, should advise them to take ownership. And the real estate licensee should never advise people how to take ownership, because that constitutes legal advice, and we're not attorneys. We're not authorized to practice law. So that one's frustrating when they ask it that way. But if they ask what form of ownership would this be in this scenario, well, that's a differently phrased question altogether. Then have at it and answer using the knowledge that you've acquired through your studies here. Okay, so this is just my word of caution when taking exam questions on how to answer that. All right. So let's get into the next form of ownership, which is tenancy in common. Or in the commercial real estate world, they often refer to it as a TIC. They love their acronyms in commercial real estate. So a TIC, or tenancy in common, is the default form of ownership. When there's two or more people that own property, they do so as tenants in common. In tenancy in common, each owner has an undivided interest in the whole property. Although the tenant in common may hold, say, 1/2 or 1/3 interest in the property. Oh, there's a whole lot going on there, but we're going to discuss this on the next slide where I break it down with a better explanation, because a lot of this stuff is going over our heads right now. You don't even realize it. Like they say each owner has an undivided interest in the whole property. What does that mean? On the next slide, I'll have an explanation for that. So for right now, let's just do all the highlights for everything you see on this slide. We'll go to the next one and take it from there. So just get those highlights for right now.
Got it.
All right.
I got
Anybody,
it too.
anybody need more time, or everybody got it?
No, done.
All right. So what is going on? All right, let me stop that. I hit some kind of button. I don't know where I hit it on Zoom. So let me get that Zoom screen back. There we go. Everybody see it again? See the Zoom screen again?
Yep.
Okay. So here is my slide I put together. You may want to snap a picture of this. That has everything you need to know about tenancy in common. And as you do that, I'm going to grab some of these terms as well and update the notes while you do your screenshots there. Right, awesome. All right, so tenancy in common is the default form of ownership when two or more owners, whether it's people or entities, businesses, the people who are not married to each other automatically creates a tenancy in common unless you specify you wish to take ownership in another form. That form of ownership would be a joint tenancy, which we're going to get into next. Now, a corporation can be a partner with a partial ownership interest in a property. So owners can have unequal ownership shares of interest in the property. An example would be one would have 25% ownership, another would have 75% ownership. If not stated in the deed, you're automatically 50-50. So even if one of the people put up 25% of the cash, the other put up 75% of the cash, if you don't specifically specify that one's 25% owner, the other 75%, your equal ownership share is 50-50. Now, owners can devise their interest. They can leave it in a will to anyone upon their death. They could sell their interest without the consent or permission of their co-owners, although that may be difficult to do. And I put a note here for you that licensees must use caution when selling partial ownership interest in a property. They're not selling the entire property, but just a partial ownership interest in a property. This could be construed as a security. And in selling securities, you may have to have special licensing. So you need to have, this is a security, so you need to have one of these, I forget if it's a series 3, 5, 7, or what series of license it is. It's one of these financial licenses in dealing in securities. And you're also going to need someone with a real estate license involved as well, because that security is real estate. So you're going to need both licenses involved. If you don't hold both of these licenses, you could get somebody that has the proper type of securities license to deal in securities, to sell partial ownership interest in a property. Otherwise, you're violating the law, and this may land you in jail, especially if somebody loses out on the deal. That may be in one of those Bernie Madoff type situations. If you guys recall that guy, Bernie Madoff, him and his son went to jail. I think he ended up killing himself, whatever, because the term was so long, because so many people, they were dealing in securities, and so many people lost so much money that it wasn't going to look good for them behind bars, and they were going to be there forever for the rest of their lives. I think the son killed himself, or was it Bernie that killed themselves? I forget which one of them did. But it's that kind of a situation. If you're dealing in securities and I mean, they did it on a massive level though. You cause somebody to lose money, especially if they're not familiar with dealing in real estate as a security, and you did not sell those securities properly, disclosing to them not just the upsides, but also the possible risks involved in dealing in securities and real estate as that security, you may be breaking the law. So just be aware of that. So often, unless it's like one of these multi-million-dollar huge properties where there's many different investors involved in this real estate as the owners, you should probably shy away from it. It's not, the juice ain't worth the squeeze on it. You need to have people with both security and real estate licenses to deal in them. Now, owners have an undivided interest in the entire property, meaning that you cannot physically distinguish which part of the property belongs to one person or another. If there are two owners of a property, as an example, you don't draw a line straight down the middle of the property and say, this is my side and that is your side, okay? Each owner is if they're 50% owner, you have 50% ownership in the entire property, not just this side or that side. That's what they mean by undivided interest in the property. So all owners will have an interest in the entire property. And unless you buy out your partner's interest, they will never own it in severalty. You will never own it in severalty unless you buy out your partner's interests, because they could always sell it off to someone else, or they can leave it in a will to somebody when they die. So when one co-owner wants to sell their property and the other does not, are you stuck owning the property with them? No. You could try to sell your ownership interest on your own, which may be difficult to do. You could ask your co-owner to buy you out, but if they don't have the money to, or they're not interested in buying you out, are you still stuck owning the property with them? The answer is no. There's a solution. You can sue the co-owner. It's called a partition proceeding, where one co-owner takes another to court and a judge will see if the property can be physically partitioned. And if that is not possible, then the judge will order the property sold, and each party gets their proportionate shares of ownership from the profits of the sale. So because of one party being forced to sell when they really don't want to, this is a form of involuntary alienation. A partition proceeding is a court proceeding where one co-owner sues another, forcing them to divide or sell the property. That's a form of involuntary alienation because they didn't want to sell, you did, and you forced them to do the sale. Okay? Any questions?
I have a question.
Shoot.
What does security mean? Like, what is security?
Security is like an investment. And there's a lot of different kinds of securities, whether it's dealing in stocks or bonds or in this instance, it's a security would be an investment that is secured by some sort of project. You know, in this case, that project would be the ownership of real estate that would generate income, or to invest in fixing and flipping a property perhaps together, you know, but in this case, you're buying a property, investing in it, holding on to it so that you could generate income from the rentals. And then when you eventually sell it, if you eventually sell it, you gain more profit at that time. But it's investing in a property that you may not own, perhaps. Like, for instance, you as a real estate agent, you're going to be helping out people to buy a house, to search for properties. You're going to help investors search for properties that they could make a profit off, whether holding on to it or fixing or flipping or whatever. And let's say that you get an idea now that you're starting to get an eye for real estate, that you could see these properties that investors are looking for a mile away. So now you're getting that real estate investor eye. And you're like, only if I wish I had the money that I could actually buy it and do these investments myself. I could find these properties a mile away and I'm missing out on all these investments. Only if I wish I could get the money to do it myself. So you get an idea. I'm going to advertise this property to the general public, my project. I'm going to advertise to the general public how they could invest in my real estate project, and I'm going to share in part of the profits with them. However, they're not actually going to be the owners of the property. That's one example of a security. Okay? They're not actually going to be the owners of the property, but you're promising them all the potential a percentage of the profits that you're going to make off of holding on to this real estate project of yours. However, if you don't disclose to them the possible downsides, the risks that are involved, they could lose their money. And that's what dealing in securities is. You need to get the person with that special license that analyzes risk and puts together what we call a prospectus, which is prospectus is not just explaining what the upside potential is on how you can profit from it, but also the risk involved and the possible ways you could lose out on it. Okay. And when you're dealing with a property where you have many owners in it, and you're not selling the property, but you're only selling one person's interest in that property, under certain circumstances, it could be classified as a security. Now, you may be asking me, well, what those circumstances are. It is so damn complicated, I couldn't tell you. I had a commercial agent show me an article once from one of their commercial magazines, and it was a 4-page article warning about the IRS. This was an article put out by the IRS to real estate agents that are offering properties, partial ownership interest in properties, and helping people sell partial ownership interest, giving them a warning to be careful, because if they don't have the special license to deal in securities, that they could be breaking the law, and they could land them in jail if they do this. And I read this 4-page article, it must have been 5 or 10 times, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out what the difference was of it. Like the difference was so minute. So this is why I advise you, you know what? When somebody's selling a partial ownership interest, unless you have somebody involved who has that securities license to know if this would be a security, and you would need their license as well as yours to be involved, I say just avoid it. Tell the person, try to sell their ownership interest, their partial ownership interest on their own, unless all the partners are looking to sell the property and liquidate the property. Then we can help them. But if only one of them is selling their partial ownership interest, that could be classified as a security, and then we would need somebody involved that has the proper licensing to sell it. Okay? So the bottom line is pretty complicated that I don't even understand it. So I don't even deal with them. So that my 2 cents, my 2 cents to you is probably don't deal with them either, unless you get somebody involved that also has that special license to deal in securities. My brother does this stuff for a living. He's got all those Series 3, Series 5, Series 7, and all these. There's a bunch of other licenses. I don't even remember them. There's so many of them. I don't know which license is required to deal in securities. So, but there's a license involved. I know that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But once again, that's dealing only with when you have multiple owners and one owner is trying to sell their interest, but the other owners are not. Okay, that's where it starts getting really shady. So owners have an undivided interest in the entire property. Once again, where you can't physically distinguish which part of the property belongs to who. We already went over that. Unless you buy out your partner's interest, they'll never own it in severalty. And when one co-owner wants to sell and the others don't, you could ask them to buy you out or sell your interest on your own, which may be difficult, or you could partition the property. And once again, the partition proceeding is a form of involuntary alienation where one co-owner sues another, forcing them to sell the property if it cannot be partitioned, physically partitioned into two separate properties. Okay, so the other option is joint tenancy. Joint tenancy is when two or more people, not entities. An entity can never be, a corporation can never own a property as a joint tenancy. So a joint tenancy is when two or more people, not entities, corporations can never own as a joint tenant, can choose to own property as joint tenants. I say they could choose because you have to choose. You have to state at the time you're taking the ownership that you wish to take ownership in this form. Otherwise, the default form of ownership when there's two or more owners of a property is tenancy in common. So, unless you specify otherwise, and then you would specify, hey, we want to take ownership as joint tenants. Now, why would you want to specify that you want to take ownership as joint tenants instead of the default tenancy in common? Well, because it has the right of survivorship. Well, what is the right of survivorship? Well, it's when one of the co-owners dies, the surviving remaining co-owners will automatically equally split the ownership of the owner who had died. Now, why would you want to do this? What scenario? Talk to an attorney. This is legal advice, okay? I don't give legal advice. But I could explain to you what a joint tenancy is. It's another form of ownership when you have two or more owners. A corporation can never be an owner in a joint tenancy situation. The reason being is because corporations never die, right? People die. Corporations don't. Corporations, when they want to get shut down, they get dissolved, but they don't die. People do. So you could have a CEO of a corporation and they die, they just get replaced with another CEO and the corporation lives on. So it would always be the last man standing, so to speak, in this scenario, which is why a corporation can never be an owner as a joint tenant. Because what is the only benefit of joint tenancy?
Affordability?
The right of survivorship. The right of survivorship. What is the right of survivorship? When one co-owner dies, the surviving co-owners will automatically equally split the shares of the owner who had died until there's one person remaining. At which point they will own it in severalty, and then they can leave it in a will to their heirs. A joint tenant cannot leave a property in a will. Why? Because when they die, their co-owners split their shares. That's the whole purpose of joint tenancy, the right of survivorship. So that happens. Everybody understand that? So which form of ownership can you never leave by will to heirs or devisees?
Partnership?
A
The
joint
right of survivorship.
tenancy.
Can you explain it again? Sorry.
Sure. Joint tenancy. Here, we're reading along and I put a little note here too. Joint tenant, by default, if you buy a property with someone else that you're not married to, okay, the default form of ownership is tenancy in common. With a tenancy in common, you can leave when you die, you can leave your interest in that property to your heirs or devisees. In a joint tenancy, you cannot, because the only benefit to creating a joint tenancy is to have the right of survivorship. And the right of survivorship means that if one of the co-owners dies, the remaining surviving co-owners will automatically
The
get
owner.
that ownership from the owner that died, and they will equally split it and divide it amongst them if there's more than one.
Yeah.
So basically that it can't be passed down because it's in a because there's a partnership. So if there's one other owner,
Hold on a second. It can't be passed down because those owners have the right of survivorship. They have the right to inherit the interest of the owner who died. Whereas the default form of ownership, the tenancy in common with you, when you have two or more owners, you can have unequal ownership shares and you can devise your interest in a will to anyone you want. Whereas joint tenancy, you have to specify that you don't want to take ownership as tenant in common, but you rather take ownership in the form of a joint tenancy. If you don't specify you wish to take ownership in this form, the default form of ownership is tenancy in common. So why would anybody want to create a joint tenancy? So that they could
Right.
get this right of survivorship. That's the only benefit to joint tenancy, is the right of survivorship. So that means you cannot leave your ownership shares in a will to anybody, because upon your death, your partners will automatically split your shares of ownership. That's the whole purpose of joint tenancy. Why you would want to do this? Talk to an attorney. I don't know.
What happens if, like, God forbid, the two owners die?
Well, we're going to
Well,
go. We're going to go over a couple of scenarios right now. But
Okay.
first, let's dive into this a little bit deeper. So, eventually, as all the co-owners die, ownership is divided equally among the surviving co-owners. That's the right of survivorship. That's what it is. That's what it does. So, which will eventually leave one owner as a tenant in severalty, and through the process called the right of survivorship. So eventually, as all the co-owners die off, it will leave one person remaining. Now, if you have a question about, well, what happens if they're all in the same plane and the plane crashed and all the owners died at the same time? What happens to joint tenancy? I actually asked an attorney that because I got asked this question so often in classes. And the attorney said, well, it would actually revert to a tenancy in common. And then all of those owners, heirs, can lay claim to their ownership shares of their descendant who died. So there are 4 unities required to create a joint tenancy. So you need to specify at the time here, to create a joint tenancy in New Jersey, language in the deed must expressly state the titles to be taken in that form. So you have to expressly state that you intend to take ownership as joint tenants instead of a tenancy in common. You must state that in the deed. You have to. Then you can only create a joint tenancy if you have 4 unities in common. And there's an acronym here to remember those 4 unities. TTIP, the unity of time, title, interest, and possession. That may be an exam question all in its own. I know what is the only purpose of having joint tenancy? What is the only benefit to having joint tenancy? And you guys would answer what on exam?
Right of
The
survivorship.
right of survivorship.
Of survivorship. And if I were to ask you what the right of survivorship is, just so that you could educate me, what would you tell me? Uh-oh. Okay.
That you get to own the property if your partner dies and you don't have to pass it on to
If there was only one other partner, correct.
or whatever, yeah.
Otherwise, if there's several surviving partners, they would all equally split the shares of the owner who had died.
Right.
That's what the right of survivorship is. Okay, now in order to create this joint tenancy, in order to get that right of survivorship, you have to specifically state in the deed, we wish to take ownership of this real estate in this manner as joint tenants together, because we want that right of survivorship. Now, the law says in order to create a joint tenancy, you have to have 4 unities in common. The unity of time, title, interest, and possession. So what does that mean? The book put it in a little bit of a different order here. I'd like to switch up that order. The unity of time. All joint tenants must acquire their interest at the same time. The unity of title. All joint tenants must acquire their interest by the same deed that conveys the ownership interest to them. The unity of interests. All joint tenants hold equal ownership shares of interest. In other words, you can't have one owner who's 25% owner and another one at 75%. They all have to have equal ownership shares. Tenancy in common, the owners can have unequal ownership shares, but a joint tenancy, they must be equal. Otherwise, it's not a joint tenancy. and the unity of possession. All joint tenants hold undivided possession of the property, where you don't draw a line down the center of the property and say, this side is mine, that side's yours. Whatever my proportionate shares of interest are, I own that percentage of the entire property. Not that that corner is mine or that half is mine and that half is yours. Okay, so I have that explanation down here at the bottom too. It means you cannot physically distinguish which part of the property is owned by an individual. If you're 50% owner, you own 50% of the entire property and cannot physically distinguish which part is yours versus a co-owner's.
What about if one of the partners, let's say there's a 50-50 partnership, one of them lives in the, say it's a 2-family unit. So one's rented out and one of them lives in it. Is that distinguished or no?
Well, occupancy is different from ownership. So it's a different matter altogether.
No, they own it and they occupy one part. One of the partners own 50% and he occupies 50% of it.
Well, it doesn't matter. The interest is undivided. Your other owner still owns your side of the property that you're occupying too. They have 50% ownership in the entire property.
Oh, okay, I get it.
The interest has to be undivided. The possession, rather, has to be undivided. That's what we refer to as the possession. Okay, so now I have, you guys put these notes on in your book there. Under creating, well, let's see. Did you do this first? On the top of page 121 where it says joint tenancy, did you guys highlight this and make these notes here above it?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody got that? Okay, and then on the bottom of the page, where it says joint tenancies, right above it, 4 unities required to create a joint tenancy, TTIP. And then a little bit further down where it says 4 unities are required to create a joint tenancy, I wrote 4 unities, TTIP, time, title, interest, and possession, because that's the best way to memorize it versus this out of order way. Possession, interest, time, title. Somebody rearranged this in the book. It used to be always in this order: time, title, interest, and possession, because that's the best way, easiest way to make it flow and memorize. TTIP. Unities of time, title, interest, and possession are required to have a joint tenancy, to create a joint tenancy. And if any of these unities are missing, you know it's not a joint tenancy. So get all those notes. Let me know when you guys have all these notes, the TTIP written there, because you could get a question. What is the main benefit to have a joint tenancy? It's the right of survivors. You could have a question, what are the 4 unities required to create or have a joint tenancy? TTIP, the unities of time, title, interest, and possession. And this will probably be a question on exams. You have to know that what these 4 unities are too. That they got to take ownership at the same time using the same deed. You cannot have unequal ownership shares. All right. And you can't leave it by will to your heirs because of the right of survivorship, of course. Those are things that those are the types of things that you may get questions on exam about. So let me know when you guys have these notes down, and I'm going to go to the next slide where I have everything explained on one slide. And then we'll go through a series of slides that I put together, which give various scenarios on how this stuff can be affected as owners die off. Or sell off their interests. Because joint tenants are still free to sell their ownership interest without the other's consent. But then in that case, what would that do to the joint tenancy? Ugh. I'm going to show you pictures. I'm a visual person. Many people are. So I'm going to show you through imagery how to explain this. I see why they changed up the order of the TTIP in the book, because whoever this guy is that did the rewrite, I was supposed to do a rewrite here with this person. Thank goodness I didn't, because he ended up bastardizing this book with his corny acronyms and ways to remember things. He made up his own, which is kind of the opposite of what most people have done throughout history here in learning this. Instead of TTIP, he says the way to remember it is through an acronym: HIT, possession, interest, time, and title. That's why he changed the order of all of this and screwed things up. All right, everybody get these notes? Everybody got them down, the highlights in the notes here?
Yes.
All right. So here we go as a slide. You could grab a screenshot of this if you like. Two or more owner, joint tenancy, when you have two or more owners, usually not married to each other. A corporation can never be a joint tenant because of its perpetual existence. Corporations will never die unless they're formally dissolved. To create a joint tenancy, it must be specified in the deed that you wish to take ownership in this form at the time you purchase the property. Otherwise, the default form of ownership with two or more people not married to each other creates a tenancy in common. The only benefit to having a joint tenancy is the right of survivorship. If one co-owner dies, the surviving co-owner or owners automatically equally split the shares of the owner who had died. So owners can't leave or devise their ownership shares by will. All owners must have equal ownership shares. So 50-50, not 75 and 25. If there's two owners, it has to be 50-50. All owners can have an undivided interest, or all owners do hold an undivided interest in the entire property, where you cannot physically distinguish which side belongs to who. You have 50% ownership in the property, then you have a 50% ownership in the entire property. You can't physically distinguish which part is mine and which part is yours that you own on your own. You don't own on your own. Each partner has a proportionate share of interest of the entire property. And each owner is free to sell their interest without the consent of the other owners. That, however, would destroy the joint tenancy, converting the new owner's interest to a tenancy in common, because they no longer have the four unities, and that new owner would not have the four unities as those original owners would. So if you had four owners, but one owner sold their interest to a new owner, that new owner would be a tenant in common, but the three original owners would still be joint tenants with each other. Owners can partition the property. So if one partner wants to sell and the others don't, they could also do the partition court proceeding. And it's possible to be converted to a tenancy in common or tenancy in severalty as the owners die off or sell off their interest. So if you have this scenario, you have three owners on a property. Okay, three owners, A, B, and C. They all have equal ownership shares. What form of ownership is this? If all you do is you look at this pie chart and you see three owners with equal ownership shares, what kind of ownership is this?
Joint
Joint
tenancy.
tenancy.
That was a trick question because we're talking about joint tenancy. You automatically assumed it's joint tenancy. Remember, if you do not specify it's joint tenancy, what's the default form of ownership? It's tenancy.
Tenancy in common.
Okay. So I told you if you just look at this chart and you see three owners that have equal ownership shares, what kind of ownership is it? You guys jump to the joint tenancy. The default form of ownership, two or more owners not married to each other. Doesn't matter what their ownership shares of interest are. It's a tenancy in common. Okay, so let's just say now we have these three owners A, B, and C, and we specify they have equal ownership shares, and they specified they wanted to take joint tenancy at the time they took the ownership. What happens if one of those co-owners die? Well,
Equally,
let's just
equally
say
divided into A and if B
Yeah.
died, equally divided into A and C.
look right here. Owner B died. We're going to automatically split owner B's shares between A and C. So now they're 50-50 owners. That's an example of the right of survivorship. Now, what happens if owner C dies? Well, if owner C dies, then there'll only be one. He takes all of owner C's interest, and now there's one man standing, so to speak. The last man standing will hold it as a tenancy in severalty. And now you're free to sell that property, give it away, leave it to heirs, or any the one you name in a will that you wish to get in. Because there's no more joint tenancy. See, I got that description on these slides here at the top as well, explaining what happens if one co-owner dies. All right. All right, let's give another scenario here. We have three owners A, B, and C. Owner C is sick and tired of A and B's crap. They don't want to deal with him anymore, so he sells off his ownership interest to somebody else. This new person, we'll call them D. Okay, D did not get their ownership interest at the same time or using the same deed. So they don't have the unities of time or title. So D will not be a joint tenant with A and B. They will be a tenant in common. However, A and B will still remain as joint tenants with each other. That's why I wrote JT here between them and TC here for tenancy in common. So D will be a tenant in common with A and B, and A and B will be joint tenants still with each other. Their joint tenancy was not destroyed. C's joint tenancy was destroyed when they sold their interest to D. Make sense?
Yes.
See how the visualization of it helps a little bit? And I also have that explanation that I've been reading right here. Now, so we have three owners, these A, B, and D. What happens if owner D dies? Well, they can leave their shares of interest to anybody they want in their will because they're a tenant in common now.
Yeah.
But A and B are still joint tenants with each other. So if B dies, A will their interest, D will not because D's not a joint tenant. And so now A will have 2/3 ownership and D will have 1/3. You guys see how that worked? Any questions?
So
No, it's clear.
I just want to confirm. So the first example, A, B, and C. So it's not joint tenant. It's tenant in common, correct?
The very first one, yeah, if you do not specify that you are owners as joint tenants. Remember, to create a joint tenancy, you have to specify you wish to take ownership in that form. Otherwise, you could meet all the requirements of TTIP, time, title, interest, and possession to get the ownership, but you could meet all of those requirements that are required of a joint tenancy. But if you don't specify you wish to take ownership as joint tenants, the default form of ownership is tenancy in common. You would be tenants in common. if You do not specify
Okay.
that you want to do create a joint tenancy. That's
Okay.
what I was talking about there.
So in this example, is joint tenancy or is it?
In this example, it is joint tenancy because we not only have the 4 unities, but we're also specifying that we wish to take ownership in this form.
Okay.
Is a joint tenancy. And then as one owner dies off, they split that ownership shares. And then as that last owner died, then there's one owner remaining if there was 3 to begin with. And now they own as tenants in severalty. And sole ownership where your interests are severed from all others and you're free to sell that property, give it away, or leave it in a will. But remember, if you have joint tenancy, just like tenancy in common, you could sell your interest without your co-owner's permission. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Oh. We'll do this last one and then we'll take our lunch break, by the way. Tenancy by the entirety. Tenancy by the entirety is a special tenancy between married couples. Okay. They put spouses here. They changed the verbiage in this version of the book. In the previous version of the book, they said husband and wife. But remember, before Governor Christie left office, he made gay marriage legal in New Jersey. He legalized gay marriage. So the state of New Jersey now recognizes that. So now it's a special tenancy between spouses. So now gay people can experience the same troubles and that the rest of us do, including the divorce and all that nightmares and such. But okay, so tenancy by the entirety is a special tenancy between married couples. Now, the owners must be married when they receive the property. The owners have the rights of survivorship, just like joint tenants would, because if one spouse dies, the surviving spouse would automatically get the shares of the owner who died. There is no right to partition the property either. If you want to sue your spouse to force them to move to sell the property, you guys got other issues you need to work out. There's trouble in paradise. Now, in New Jersey, conveyance to a couple who are legally married to each other or registered as domestic partners or members of a civil union in New Jersey creates a tenancy by the entirety unless the deed expressly states otherwise. In New Jersey, couples who are 62 years of age or older can register for a domestic partnership if they meet those requirements to become domestic partners. When a couple gets divorced, the tenancy by the entirety is broken and they become tenants in common. New Jersey does not recognize common law marriages. You guys know what a common law marriage is?
No.
No.
I'll explain it on the next slide. I believe I have an explanation of. But a lot of people misunderstand common law marriage as being if you are living with your significant other for a long enough period of time as defined by state law in your state, you're automatically considered married. That's not true entirely. Okay. Common law marriage is if your state recognizes common law marriage and you're living together as a couple for a long enough period of time as required by state law, and you wish to be considered married, you can be married without going through the actual formal process of getting married. That's what common law marriage is. Now, under New Jersey law, a couple in a civil union are entitled to the same rights as married couples are. All right. So here's the breakdown on tenancy by the entirety. Okay. Ownership by married couples, primary marital residence if married after May 28, 1980, or to all properties if married before. You have dower and courtesy rights, right? So that makes a difference if you have dower or courtesy rights. If you're married before May 28, 1980, your spouse has the right of survivorship of all the properties that you own. They have a marital interest in all the properties you own because you have the right of dower and courtesy. But if you were married after May 28, 1980, your spouse has the right of survivorship and they get the primary marital residence. Unless you had a prenuptial agreement or some legal agreement in writing that said that something to the contrary. If you're married after May 28, 1980, and you had no prenuptial agreements or anything other than that, we're just going by the dower and courtesy rights. After May 28, 1980, you have no more dower and courtesy rights just for the primary marital residence. Your spouse gets the primary marital residence, and if only one spouse was listed as the owner of another property, they could leave that property to someone else. It doesn't need to be their spouse if they were married after May 28, 1980. So New Jersey does not have common law marriage. And when a couple divorces, ownership reverts to a tenancy in common, which is the default form of ownership of two or more parties not married to each other, and they no longer have the right of survivorship, which is why one spouse can take the other, forcing them to go to court to sell off the property so that they could get their percentage of the ownership, unless a judge ordered the one spouse to get that property and be the sole owner of that property, which could possibly happen, like in the event of you have children and things get a little bit more complicated when we get into different scenarios like that. Now, no right of partition is allowed while you're married, because you got other issues if you have to sue your spouse because you want to move and they don't want to, and you take them to court to sue them to force them to sell the property. No, that's not allowed while you're married, only after you're divorced, And if you're looking to sue your spouse, it looks like that's the direction that you're going. Corporation can never be a tenant by the entirety because corporations don't get married. People do. Corporations, when they get together, they have merger. And when they break up, they dissolve. The right of survivorship with married couples would be defined as when one co-owner, one spouse dies, the surviving co-owner spouse automatically inherits the ownership interest of the owner who died, just like in the joint tenancy. The partition would only take place if you divorce, not while you're married. You cannot sue your spouse when you're married. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about common law marriage just to clarify it up a little bit more for you after our break. So common law marriage, what is that? I got a link here for that too. And here we go. Common law marriage states The ones in green, let's see, have or recognize common law marriage. The ones in red do not. There we go. Yeah, tell me if you're not seeing what I'm showing you. And then here are the states, let's see, that recognize common law marriage with the blue dots, and with the red ones, they do not. That's the majority of them.
I kind of see it as like red states and blue states. It's mostly blue states that don't have common law, right?
No, I mean,
No, nothing like that.
Pennsylvania, you got over there. You know, so no, it's a mix over here. Ohio's it flip flops. South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama. New Hampshire is definitely a blue state. They recognize it. Most
Oh,
most states don't recognize it anymore. There are some that still do. Let's see, what states have common law marriage still? How about that? So let's see, as of 2018, 8 states acknowledge common law marriages through final legislation. Those states are Colorado, very blue state, District of Columbia, very blue, Iowa, I'm not sure, Kansas, Montana, New Hampshire, super blue, Texas, Utah. The requirements to establish common law marriage vary by state. In DC, marriage is legally recognized without a ceremony or marriage license if both parties are legally allowed to marry, wish to be married, and if the community knows the couple as husband and wife. In Texas, there's 2 ways that a couple can enter into a common law marriage. One way is for a couple to agree to marry, live with each other within the state, and represent to others that they are married. Couples may also file a declaration of informal marriage with the county clerk. While some states permit people to get married before they turn 18 with parental consent, some common law marriage states require that both parties be 18. Colorado and Kansas common law marriage statutes state that this requirement. In some states, common law marriage is permitted only for a specific purpose. For example, Iowa acknowledges common law marriage simply for the support of dependents, I guess for health insurance and things of that nature. In New Hampshire, common law marriage are recognized just for probate purposes. So I guess it really depends on the state. So these are states that previously allowed common law marriage but no longer do. Alabama got rid of it in 2017, Florida in 1968, Georgia 1997, Indiana 1958, Ohio 1991, Pennsylvania 2005, and South Carolina 2019. Although they may still recognize other states' common law marriage, they no longer have it. These are the states that recognize other states' common law marriage. Unmarried equality. Okay, sure, whatever. All right, let's see. You don't need to know anything about common law marriage for exams, though. So let's continue on. So we already went over tenancy by the entirety. So as a recap, for review, tenancy and severalty is ownership by one person or entity. Tenancy by the entirety is ownership by married couples. Tenancy in common, or a TIC for short, is the default form of ownership by more than one person or entity. And joint tenancy, you have to specify you wish to take ownership in that way. Corporations can never own as joint tenants, and you must have 4 unities in common to have a joint tenancy, TTIP, unity of time, title, interest, and possession. And the only benefits to is the right of survivorship. That's the only benefit to joint tenancy. And remember, real estate licensees should never advise someone as to what form of ownership to take, because that would constitute legal advice. And we're not attorneys, so therefore we can't give legal advice. We do, however, have to be aware of the different forms of ownership to know who needs to be signing documents, and things of that nature. Okay. So now we're going to talk about different business structures. Business structures. Okay, let's take a look. Sole proprietorship is ownership of a business by one owner, the owner operator. You have business partnerships, which can be two or more owners. And there's different forms of partnerships. We're going to learn about it in momentarily. You have corporations, which are legally formed business entities, and a lot of paperwork and expense required to keep up that corporation. We have limited liability companies. LLC does not stand for limited liability corporation, but limited liability company. And in some instances, the limited liability company, when it starts making a decent buck, I believe that that's, what is that amount? I forget if it's, I think it's around $50,000 or so. When LLCs are making $50,000 or more, it probably makes sense for that LLC to file their taxes as an S corp, an S corporation. So you still get the easy management and lower costs of having a limited liability company, but you have some savings, and you could save a lot of money when you're making more than that amount, around the 50,000 area. You could start saving a lot more money if you file your taxes as an S corp. Right? Remember, consult with tax professionals about this stuff. I'm not a tax professional, and I don't play one on TV. Okay. Syndicates and joint ventures are not generally legally formed entities. A syndicate is just the joining together of two or more people to carry out a business project. When the project is done, the syndicate's done. There's no formal paperwork that needs to be registered with the state to create a syndicate, or a joint venture for that matter, which is similar to a syndicate. Instead of two or more people, it's two or more groups that come together to carry out a business project. They're not legally formed business entities. And now we're going to be discussing real estate investment trusts, REITs. Who says that you need to invest in, what the hell is it? Mutual funds for your retirement plans. Why not invest in real estate projects and such? Well, you can. A REIT is a group, it's an investment trust that invests in real estate, shopping centers, commercial structures, strip malls, etc., apartment complexes, and the profits from those would be shared with the investors. So they pay out a slow, steady profit, just like those mutual funds do. And they get the same tax advantages as mutual fund investors. And we're going to learn about that coming up in just a moment. Just get caught up in my slides here. And Yikes. Okay, that's not. All right. So a partnership, there's two different kinds of partnerships, and the guy who rewrote this book or re-edited this book doing the updates for this last version, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. His easy way to explain things is always making things more complicated too. So let's do some crossing out and changing of these notes here a little bit in this 18th version of the book. There's two types of partnerships. We have general partnerships and limited partnerships. And to understand them, we first need to understand what a general partner is. A general partner is someone who works in the day-to-day activities of the business itself, and they're also an owner of the business. So in a general partnership, all of the partners are owners of the business that actually work in the business day-to-day activities. And they can be held liable for any additional debts that the business takes on. Now, I want you to cross out this line here where they wrote in the book, and this is totally wrong, where the guy wrote, ironically, there's no general partner in a general partnership because all the partners participate in the day-to-day management of the business. I don't know what that statement even means. That's wrong. Cross that out. What is correct is in a general partnership, all the partners participate to some extent in the operation of the management of the business and can be held liable for the business's losses and obligations, even beyond the amount of their initial investment. So this statement that says, ironically, there's no general partner in a general partnership is just wrong, because all of the partners are general partners in a general partnership. Whereas in a limited partnership, there's at least one general partner and all the others are limited partners. So what is a limited partner? A limited partner is one who does not work in the day-to-day business activities. They just invested in the business, and they can't be held liable for any additional loans or debts that the business shall take on. They're limited in their liability to the extent of their initial investment. That's all they could lose if the business loses money. Okay. So let's see, the limited partnership is a popular method of organizing investors in a real estate project. Okay, so let me also give you another simple, dumbed down explanation of this. Okay, a general partnership is, once again, people who are working in the day-to-day activities of the business. They're the owners of the business, but they also work in the business. So if that business takes on any additional debts or loans, all of the general partners in a general partnership, which general partnership consists of only general partners, can be held liable for any additional debts the business takes on. Whereas in a limited partnership, there's at least one general partner. All the others are limited in their liability. So that an example of a limited partnership is you start a business and you go and you get a loan from the Bank of Mom. Now, Mom doesn't know anything about your business. She doesn't care about your business except that you're successful in all your endeavors in life, right? So Mom just became a partner in your business because she invested in it. However, she doesn't know anything about your business. She's not working a day-to-day activity. So Mom's a limited partner in this business venture of this partnership. You, however, work the day-to-day activities of the business. You could be held liable for any additional debts that you take on, etc. Mom is limited in her liability to the extent of her losses are limited to her initial investment in the business. But a general partner, if they take on additional loans for depending on what type of business it is, if they take on additional loans for maybe equipment or machinery or inventory or stock or whatever it is, Mom can't be held liable for paying for those things. She just can lose her initial investment in the business. That's all she can lose out on. But you could be held liable not just for the losses, but also any additional debts that you took on, like for all that equipment or stock or inventory. Everybody got these notes highlighted here?
Got it.
Okay. So in this slide's probably a little bit clearer cut, a little bit neater. The study, about business partnerships. All right. So in a general partnership, this gives the explanations that I've always given. That guy totally undid who did this rewrite of the book. He totally screwed it up. All right. So yeah, ironically, there's no general partner in a general partnership because all the partners participate in the day-to-day activities of the business. That doesn't even make sense. I don't think this guy knows what a general partner is or does. So that is wrong. We shall cross that out.
How do you indicate like what you are? Or what the structure is?
And the paperwork and the formation when you create the business.
So this has nothing to do with the actual real estate. This has to do how you're
This has nothing to do with real estate. This is just talking about business structures.
right. Okay.
Because we need to understand, can a business own real estate?
Yeah.
Yes. So who can sign contracts to buy real estate or sell real estate or lease real estate on the behalf of a business? See, this is what we're getting into right now. So first we need to understand the types of business
Businesses.
structures, and then we'll get into that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there we go. So real estate ownership by corporations. A corporation is a fictitious entity. It is an artificial person for taxation purposes and for legal protections. This is why some people buy real estate in the name of it's easier to form an LLC. There's a lot less paperwork involved, etc. So this is why a lot of people who are like buying houses to fix or flip or rent out, they buy them in the name of an LLC to get those legal protections from liability, from lawsuits and such. But a corporation takes a lot more positions and a lot more paperwork involved and a lot more cost and expense involved for an official corporation versus an LLC type of corporate structure. But they both offer same kinds of legal protections. So
Can I just ask over here? If you're buying something under an LLC, right? Is that considered taking out like a business loan because your LLC is a business?
No, you're just talking about the ownership. Loans versus ownership are two different matters. Okay, how does a business take a loan is a different question than if a business owns a piece of real estate or not. Okay, ownership.
Right. So if the buyer considers itself an LLC, is it taking out a different kind of loan?
You could go to the bank. Businesses can take loans. They just have hard times doing them if they're brand new businesses.
Right.
The banks, there's too much risk involved for the lender. So they're going to want maybe an individual or two to personally guarantee the loan.
Oh, I get it.
You know, as trust builds and your business gets, you know, some history behind it, that you're not going out of business tomorrow, then the lender will have less of a problem loaning to you next time. But some people, they could borrow money. They could borrow money from banks and just with a conversation with the right person, you know, because they become so successful or so rich, you know, they take their word on it. Some of the lenders seek out these people just to give them money, to throwing money at them. You know, let's take some famous people, for example. We'll take Trump, for example. You know, he's the president now, but when he was you know, he gets loans from businesses all the time, since that was an issue that was brought up when his detractors were using the lawfare to go after him, making up all kinds of nonsense about, oh, well, he lied about the cost of what the value of his property is or whatever. Banks, those lenders were throwing money at him. They wanted to lend money to him because they know he's good for it and paying it back. You know, sure, he's had a couple businesses over the years that failed and filed bankruptcy. You know, or some of those recovered and ended up being successful businesses. Bankruptcy is just a temporary protection, or it could maybe not be able to recover and it goes out of business, you know. But the far majority of the hundreds of businesses that he created over the years were very profitable. So lenders are willing to throw money at this guy because they know that they're going to get it back and they're going to make money off of it. You know, so that's the trust that was built between the lending institutions and this investor. Versus if you go in there to those same banks and you try to get a loan, they're going to give you the third degree. Right? You see the difference there? So you got to have some kind of a business history or structure or trust or knowledge to the lender that you have the ability to make money and be a successful business. Because if it just goes out of business, where does the lender stand with their loan? They could chase after the business, but if the business has nothing, they're not going to get anything. So this is why they want some personal guarantees from the borrowers, maybe the owners of the business, to also personally guarantee the loan, not just the business. That's how you go about getting loans for these businesses. Now, you could also try to build that up in certain ways. You know, most of these loans require money to be put down. And especially if it's a commercial loan, which it is if it's to a business, there's going to be, they require a substantial down payment, at least to a non-established business at first. Now, I had a girl in one of my classes getting her real estate license just so that she could save a little money on the houses that she's fixing and flipping and whatnot. Some of them she's fixing and then keeping as investments, but the majority she fixes and flips. She took my course. And she was like, oh, yeah. She's like, I got like several deals going on right now. So I asked her, I was like, you're pretty young. I was like, where did you get the money? You come from a wealthy family or something? Where did you get the money to get started in the investment? And she's like, well, you know how you get these offers all the time in the mail, you know, from your credit cards and stuff where they'll loan you so much money interest free for the first couple of months or whatever, as long as you pay it back in full by a deadline, you know, and it's at a higher interest rate. So she took that loan out to get the money from her credit cards. And then she went to a bank that was to get a commercial loan. And she used that as the down payment to get the loan because the banks required her to put down so much money. So she didn't really use any of her own money. She took out money from a credit card to use as the down payment, took the rest of the money from the banks who lend it to her, a different bank that would lend it to her. And then she used it to buy a house, fix it up, flip it, and then pay everybody back. And as she did this several times, she started to build relationships with the lenders. And now they don't even ask for the paperwork anymore. And often they don't even ask her to put much money down, if any at all, because she built up that relationship with the local lenders, you know, and that's the way lending works, you know. So least with corporations and companies and such. So corporations cannot own. Hey, you don't believe me? Hey, did you guys ever see that another? Was that HBO or Netflix? I think it was another Netflix series. Did you guys ever see that Netflix series? What is it called? Making Anna. You guys ever hear that? Making, what was it? Netflix series.
I think I've seen that one.
Let me see what it was called. Let me just Google it really quick. Netflix series Making Anna. Something to that effect. Inventing Anna. That's what it was called. Look this up. Look up this movie. You know, I'm gonna add this to our movie playlist here in that ClassLinks Word document. Inventing Anna. Anybody here ever see that?
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
this is a true story about this girl named Anna Sorkin. She basically made up this whole persona of herself, and nobody actually really knew who she was. All of a sudden, she started popping up on the scene everywhere where these rich and famous people, you know, there's the kids of the uber rich hang out. She started hanging out with all these kids of the uber rich, you know, who throw money around like it's air, you know, like you could breathe it. So she fit in. She started showing up on the scenes of these events and stuff, and started acting like money's not a thing, and you know, acted just like them, you know, especially the ones who have the most money. She had that kind of an attitude, and she started getting the attention of these people. They started liking her and accepted her into their inner circle. And then she eventually came up with a business idea, business plan for herself. And as she built up trust and all these friends that are uber rich, and she was able to use their influence to con a bunch of Wall Street executives and lenders and the major players in the banking industry and major investment companies and firms. She ended up getting them to ignore their own standard business practices for lending when they're lending hundreds of millions of dollars. And she got them to approve a loan for her to buy this very expensive property somewhere in Manhattan, where she wanted to open up a club, you know, for the uber rich. And then that would have made it for her, and she would have been uber rich. And she was very, very close to it. She actually got all the approvals and everything. And then somebody got screwed out of some money from her and started making a big deal about it. And then the word quickly spread because they started getting the police involved, and, you know, because they want to file a complaint against her. And this is what led to the exposure of her. But a lot of people refused to be witnesses and to file charges against her because it would have made them look stupid and weak, that this young girl made these strong, powerful Wall Street executives look like fools. So nobody would file charges against her, except for one of these other rich girls that got upset over her. So then they ended up jailing her over some kind of technicality, and nobody really knew who she was. They still had to figure out who the hell she really was, because she played herself off as some kind of German heiress. And in the meantime, I think she was a Russian girl. Her father was poor, and she just popped up on the scene here in the United States somehow, just made this persona for herself. But that just shows you how these banking industries and the lending actually works. it had nothing really to do with paperwork, but just on, oh, I know her, I could vouch for her. I could vouch for her. It was all about, the relationships that were built, which was, it's incredible what she pulled off. So she could have really been a powerhouse despite having no education in these things. She's self-educated, and her attitude that she took, acting like these rich fools, she played their game and she outplayed them, except for one person who was playing a little baby game, and they ended up being the end of her. So you may want to watch that. It's a short one series, mini series called Inventing Anna. It seems kind of ridiculous, but it's true that it actually happened. And she just recently got out of jail, and then they deported her. Okay, so corporations cannot own real estate as joint tenants or tenants by the entirety, because a corporation's life is a perpetual existence. It lives on until it's formally dissolved. You could have presidents and CEOs die and they just get replaced and the corporation lives on. It never dies. And corporations cannot never be tenants by the entirety, because that is ownership by married couples, and corporations don't get married, people do. So corporations can only own real estate as tenants in severalty if it's sole ownership, or tenancy in common if it's a partial ownership. Now, who makes all the decisions in a corporation to buy or sell real estate? Well, it's a decision that's made by the board of directors. A president or CEO of a company cannot unilaterally make these major decisions on their own. Maybe in instances they can, but not a major purchase that could really affect the company's assets. They would need to seek approval from the board of directors of the corporation. Anybody knows what well, I got it written down here. So the main, the job of the board of directors is to look out for the best interests of the company's shareholders, its investors, right? You're not going to get people to invest in your corporation if they know that you're pissing away their money. So a corporation can convey real estate only upon a resolution passed by the board of directors. And I believe that's going to be an exam question too, but we'll get to that on page 366. So well, let's do this highlight on page 124. This one and then this one. A corporation is managed and operated by its board of directors. And give you that little cross-reference, page 366. And then we're going to turn to page 366, I believe, on the next one, and we're going to do a highlight over there. Okay, here they talk about an LLC. Investors may opt for an alternative corporate structure called an S corporation. Like a corporation, this form of legal entity, it is a form of legal entity, but its investors avoid double taxation. Only the shares of the profits passed through the shareholders are taxed, while the profits of the S corporation are not. However, S corporations are subject to strict requirements regulating their structure, membership, and operation. So you do have to keep up more paperwork than just a regular LLC, but it's a little bit less than a formal corporation. It's an S corp. Y'all got these highlights and page number reference?
Got it.
So let's turn to page 366 just for a moment, and we're going to do some highlighting here. It says, under the law, corporations considered to be a legal entity. 3 basic rules must be followed when corporations are to convey real estate. So we need to be aware of this as real estate professionals. A corporation can convey real estate only upon a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. So if somebody comes to us and they say that the corporation owns this property, wants to list it for sale with you, and wants to sell the property. You need them to provide that corporate resolution showing that the board of directors has authorized the sale of a property. If a substantial portion of that corporation's real estate is being conveyed, it also is usually required that a resolution authorizing the sale be secured from the stockholders. But that's only if they're selling all of the property that the company owns, or a major substantial portion of it. Deeds to real estate can be signed only by an authorized officer. So the person who's signing those listing agreements as well would be someone who's authorized by the board of directors to be the person to sign documents on behalf of the corporation to list it for sale, to sign the sales contracts and so forth. So when somebody walks into your office and says, yes, I know you checked the tax records and the property is owned by this LLC or this corporation, that person needs to provide evidence to us that they're authorized as the officer to sign documents on behalf of that business entity. Because who the hell are you? I know the corporation, I know the company, but who are you? Why do you come here to me wanting to sign listing documents or sales contracts or lease agreements? Are you authorized to do this? Who gave you that authorization? Where is that authorization? I need to see it. You don't take people's word for it. Quick way to lose your license. So deeds to real estate can be signed only by an authorized officer, along with those listing agreements and sales contracts as well. The authority of the officer must be granted by a resolution properly passed by its board of directors. And then they got a little note here. The corporate seal need not be affixed to the conveyance unless there's an acknowledgement that mentions the seal has to be present.
Yeah, done.
Okay. So go back to page 124 there. A syndicate is a joining together of two or more people to carry out a business project. It is not a legally formed business entity. When the project is done, the syndicate's done. And just like a syndicate, a joint venture is not a legally formed business entity either. It's a joining together of two or more groups to carry out a business project. So when that project is done, the joint venture is done. You should seek legal advice about these business entities. REITs are real estate investment trusts. REIT investors get the same tax advantages of or certain tax advantages and benefits as mutual fund investors. In order to have a REIT, there must be at least 100 investors. Now, there's also requirements to who can be an investor in a real estate investment trust, a REIT. They have to have so much in liquid assets and all this stuff too. But 75% of the trust income must come from real estate as the investment vehicle. They are stable investments that pay out slow and steady. REITs usually buy up like large apartment complexes, where there's hundreds of units, we're talking about tens and twenties and thirties and up of millions of dollars for the value of these properties. I actually had a REIT investor come into my office one time. They just walked in the front door and they were asking, "Yeah, do you have any apartment complexes or shopping centers or strip malls or something for sale? We're looking for things that start in a range of $20 million." I said, "I wish." But that's one type of investment fund, is the real estate investment trust. It's a slow, steady payout, just like mutual funds that people invest in for their retirement plans. There's nothing that says that you got to use a mutual fund, which is investing in commodities or stocks or what have you. You could have an investment fund, a trust, that gets the same tax benefits as the mutual fund investors, but invests in real estate. We could agree real estate's a pretty profitable thing. People are always going to need a place to live. And if you have an apartment complex that you own, this investment trust owns, sure, there's sometimes tenants that need to get evicted because they're not paying the rent or whatever, but overall, profitably, the entire complex is generally profitable. So it is a stable investment that pays out slow and steady the profits to those investors who invest in the REIT. Large apartment complexes with several hundred units or high-rise buildings, business centers, shopping centers. These are the types of properties that REITs invest in. Okay. Oh. So let's highlight on page 124 under ownership, other forms of ownership. This is just below the center of the page. A real estate investment trust, REIT, is a form of organization that's useful for taking advantage of certain tax benefits. And we'll write beneath that, same tax benefits as mutual fund investors. See page 333. Is that page 333 we were on? Let me just verify before you write that. Yep, it was. And we're going to go to page 333 in a moment, and then we're going to highlight this. So when you're done highlighting this and writing this note, go to page 333 and do this highlight, and then come back. Page 124. And let me know when you got all that.
Finished.
Yeah, done.
Okay, everybody good? Any more time? Everybody good?
Yeah.
Take your silence as an affirmative. All right. So let's talk now. We're going to switch over. We're done talking about businesses and real estate investment trusts and such like that. So now we're going to move on by the way, the REITs study that stuff, add that to your notes, giving you a heads up right now. You know, condos, anybody know what a condominium is? Or condo for short? What about a cooperative? Co-ops?
Isn't it like those condos that I see that I think I told you the story about me going on the train station to New York Penn Station, and I passed through Linden train station. Those new that new construction going on.
The new
Condo.
ones, I don't think they're selling. I think they're renting them. So I don't think they're condos.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a giant apartment building. Some of those buildings, they are selling them. Others, they're just renting them at incredibly high prices. Okay, so condominiums and cooperatives. Let's read this together here. Condominiums and cooperative ownership of housing has risen in the second half of the 20th century, together with townhouses and planned unit developments, which we call PUDs for short. Condos and co-ops offer the emotional, financial, and tax advantages of home ownership, combined with the advantages of apartment living. As opposed to traditional single-family homes, which, by the way, single-family homes can be a part of a condo complex as well, but generally they're not. So as opposed to traditional single-family homes, condos and co-ops offer more efficient use of ever scarcer building land, lower cost for lot development, less outlay for construction per living unit, and some savings in the maintenance and heating bills. Contributing to the growth of condos and co-ops are changes in population patterns, with the increasing number of single homeowners, one-parent families, and senior citizens. You see, as times change, as the family unit changes, where people have children more often out of wedlock, and you have single-parent families, or maybe divorce becomes more common as our society changes. There's more of a demand for this housing that's more affordable for a single homeowner or one parent, a single parent, or senior citizens. To such groups, community living offers security and sociability, ease of maintenance, and sometimes the opportunity for sharing recreational facilities that you wouldn't be able to otherwise afford in your single-family house, like having in-ground swimming pools and exercise rooms and maybe a pool room for your playing billiards, or meeting rooms, or IMAX movie theaters and tennis courts and things of that nature. You may not even have the room for that for your single-family house, right? So the terms condominiums and cooperatives refer to forms of ownership. And looking at a shared housing complex would give you no clue as to whether it's a condo or a co-op, or in even some cases, a PUD. The buildings themselves can be high-rises, townhouses, patio homes, garden apartments, and single-family detached houses. The differences arise from the legal form of ownership. So condominium ownership is not limited to residential dwellings either, because there's business condo complexes too. Anybody ever go to an attorney, a doctor, dentist, chiropractor, tax preparer, masseuse, what have you, a business condo? In a business condo is where they were conducting their business. They're out there. Cheaper way for a business to have a place. So
What kind of amenities would they share?
well, those usually don't have those kinds of amenities, like swimming courts and tennis courts and all kinds
So
of.
what's the gain?
Like that,
What's the gain of being together?
how much would it cost you to buy a single building versus buying a condo unit? It's the price, the outlay. Having a single standalone structure is significantly more than a unit in a larger complex. Plus, you don't have to worry about the maintenance of the exterior, the snow removal, the maintenance of the exterior of the building and such. That's usually included in your monthly condominium maintenance fee. So cooperative ownership is common in New York City. It's also found in certain areas of New Jersey. Cooperative ownership, sometimes referred to simply as a co-op, became popular in the 1920s as the urban population grew after World War I. Individual housing became more expensive, and the board of directors were choosy about who can buy in. The number of newly built cooperatives have decreased greatly over the last 50 years. Under the usual cooperative arrangement, title to the land and building is held by a corporation. You're doing all these highlights, though. Each purchaser of an apartment in the building receives the stock in the corporation and receives a proprietary lease that would allow them to occupy the space in which they live. That's their apartment. The cooperative building's real estate taxes are assessed against the corporation as the owner. There's usually one underlying mortgage on the entire parcel of real estate. Taxes, mortgage, principal and interest, and operating and maintenance expenses of the property are shared by the tenant shareholders in the form of a monthly maintenance charge, which is usually much higher than those in condominiums. Even though co-op owners don't actually own real estate, they own stock in a corporation that owns the real estate. The stock is personal property. For all practical purposes, they control the property through their stock ownership and their voice in the management of the corporation. Co-op bylaws generally provide that each prospective owner must be approved by a board of directors. And they usually do have minimum credit score requirements to get accepted. Usually a 620 FICO score. That's your Fair Isaacs Corporation credit scoring system. That's 620 is prime, is considered prime. That's the average. Anything below 620 is considered subprime, below average credit score. Now, why do they care what your credit score is? Condominiums don't do credit checks on you. As long as you can afford to buy in, they don't care. Why is that? Well, because in a condominium, you own the real estate and you have to pay your monthly maintenance charge. And you got to pay a separate tax bill for your unit. Whereas in a co-op, well, first of all, you don't make a mortgage loan payment. You have to get a personal loan or pay cash because you don't own real estate. In your typical mortgage loan situation, you're pledging the property as security for the loan, so the banks give you a loan. In a co-op, you don't own the property. The corporation owns the real estate, and they give you a proprietary lease to occupy the space in which you're living in. So you bought a stock certificate, you bought into that corporation, they gave you that proprietary lease. So you actually don't own real estate, so you can't pledge it as collateral for the loan. So when you buy into a co-op, you need to get a personal loan or use cash. The monthly maintenance charge on co-ops is much higher because the maintenance includes not only the regular snow removal and landscaping and the upkeep of the swimming pool and all those common amenities, but it also covers the underlying mortgage and taxes and insurance on the property that the corporation still is paying bills on. So that's why the monthly maintenance charge is much higher in a co-op than it is in a condominium. One disadvantage of co-op ownership is the possibility that if enough owner-occupants become financially unable to make their prompt payments of their monthly assessment charges, the corporation may be forced to allow mortgage and tax payments to go unpaid. This was actually a problem in the 1930s, and through such defaults, the entire property could be ordered sold by a court in a foreclosure suit. So that was just after the Great Depression. The Great Depression was in the 20s there, so the 30s, that may have been a carryover from that. So such a sale might destroy the interest of all the owners, even those who paid their assessments of their monthly maintenance charges. An accumulation of substantial funds of reserves for future repairs and emergency payments offers some protections for the cooperative as a whole. Now, I want you to highlight this. This is the definition of reserves. You need to know what reserves are. It is an accumulation of substantial funds for future repairs and emergency payments. That's what the term reserves means. Now, cooperative shareholders have all the same tax advantages of the owner of a single-family home. The portion of their maintenance charge attributable to the property tax and mortgage interest payments may be taken as tax deductions. Interest paid to finance the stock purchase is also tax deductible for that personal loan that you took. Many co-ops do not allow rentals. Who takes better care of a property, an owner or a tenant?
Owners.
An owner, of course, right? So this is why many co-ops do not permit renting, because you got too many renters there. They're not going to maintain the property as well. Plus, lenders, borrowers may have difficulty getting loans from lenders if the ratio of renters versus owner occupants becomes too high. So New Jersey law provides that owners of co-ops and buildings with 10 or more units can rent their units if they've been trying to sell them for 4 or more months at a price no greater than their initial investment, their initial purchase price. So if you're trying to rent out you're trying to sell your unit, not at a profit, but no greater than the amount that you put into it to buy it, and you're unable to sell it, New Jersey law allows you to rent it. Now, listen, different co-op complexes may have different rules that they may be okay with rentals, but the majority of them out there are not. So, under certain circumstances, co-op unit owners may rent their unit if they're unable to sell it. And that's if they have 10 or more units in the complex. That's what the New Jersey law says. So regardless of any bylaws that the cooperative may have, if the complex is 10 or more units and the owner is trying to sell it at a price no greater than their purchase price for at least 4 months and they can't sell it, they're allowed to rent. Now, that's important because I got a lot of people in this class. They ask, well, if you don't own real estate, why buy a co-op instead of a condo? And the answer is because they're much cheaper. You could have a condominium in Edison and a co-op in Edison, and they have all these same exact features: bedrooms, bathrooms, balconies, fireplaces, amenities, tennis courts, swimming pools, all that stuff. They look exactly the same, and you're living there. One, you own the unit, the real estate; the other, you own stock, and they get proprietary lease to live there. Your guests aren't going to know the difference. And your wallet's the only thing that's going to notice the difference. Why? Because it's cheaper. You could probably buy 4 co-ops for the price of 1 condo. So if you wanted to find a place to live and you don't got enough money to own, well, you could buy a co-op. Who's going to know the difference? And you'll be able to have a place that you own. And when you eventually pay off the cost of that stock to buy into the corporation, now your only payment is going to be the monthly maintenance charge, which includes the taxes and the insurance and the maintenance of the property. Look, if you buy a co-op, I'm sorry, if you buy a condo, you're going to have to you're going to make your mortgage payments till you pay off the loan. Then you still have to make a monthly maintenance fee payment for your maintaining the grounds and such, but that'll probably be much, much cheaper than a co-op's is. But you're still going to get a separate tax bill you got to pay. You're going to get your electric bill, water bills, and things of that nature. Whereas those things may be included, heat and hot water could be included in co-op's monthly payment. So cooperative living tends to develop somewhat differently from condominium occupancy. Long-term stability of tenants is common, and the corporation has the right to accept or reject any new owner is aimed at safeguarding the present ones, who would share the financial responsibility for a defaulting neighbor. But it's often used to maintain a particular level of occupancy. And it also causes trouble because a lot of people feel like they've been discriminated against if they've been denied being able to purchase in a co-op, because you got to submit an application and maybe sometimes even be interviewed. And people who have been denied, nobody likes denial. Nobody likes to be turned down or denied. And when you are, it's natural that your first go-to response is being discriminated against, which usually that's not the case. I'm sure there are instances where it was the case, but it's usually not the case. Usually the case is trying to safeguard all the other neighbors there from an potential unstable purchaser who doesn't have a great habit of paying their bills. This is why they also got minimum credit score requirements. And that's the main goal. But there are some snooty developments, snobs, where you may see things like this maybe in New York or California, or hell, maybe even New Jersey, like Hoboken area, where you got all the yuppies at. You could have somebody that does this. We have a cooperative complex here, and in the cooperative complex, we like to consider ourselves to be an artist community, a community of artists. Are you a painter? Are you a poet, a writer, an actor, a singer, a musician of some sort, a dancer? If you are not an artist, we're not going to accept you in our community, because this building is a community for artists. And is being an artist or not a protected class?
I know that such a thing exists, so I guess not.
It is not a protected class. So imagine being denied being able to purchase in a co-op complex because you're not an artist. Sure, it feels like a stab in the back. It's like, yo, you're discriminating against me. Yes, they are. You know what discrimination is? It's being selective, being choosy. There's nothing wrong with being selective or choosy. We're used to the term when we say discrimination, we're used to the negative aspect of it, like racial discrimination and things of that nature. But there's nothing wrong with the word discrimination. There's nothing wrong with having discriminating tastes for the finer things in life. The term discrimination can be used in many ways, and it's not always negative. But usually when you have a conversation with somebody and you ask them what their take on the word discrimination is, they'll often say it's associated with a negative connotation, right? But that's not really the case. In this instance, they're being discriminating because you're not an artist. So they're being selective. This is an artist community. And that's not being an artist is not a protected class. So it's not a form of discrimination that you could sue over. That's the bottom line in my example that I have just gave you. Okay. So cooperative ownership. Title to the land is held by the corporation as the owner as a whole. So purchasers do not own real estate. They own stock, which is an intangible personal asset. They're given a proprietary lease. That's a fancy name for a custom lease, which gives the tenant shareholder, the stockholder, the right to occupy the unit that they're living in. Income tax advantages are identical for those of single-family homeowners. Tenants have a voice to control the property management through their stock ownership. Monthly maintenance fee is usually much higher than those in condos because it includes the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and CAM. CAM stands for Common Area Maintenance Charge for those expenses like sewer, water, heat, trash, and snow removal. The value of the property tends to be stable and not fluctuate as radically as it would with a condominium ownership. Condominiums ownership prices, those values, they tend to fluctuate just like a single family house would. As the markets change, the value of the property could change as well. And you can appreciate in value and then sell that property at a much higher price. Cooperative owners, co-op prices tend to be a lot more stable. They don't radically fluctuate as much as condominiums or single family houses would. So there's a shared expense, usually one mortgage on the entire property. As the tenant shareholders, taxes are charged to the corporation as the owner and billed to the tenants as part of their monthly maintenance fee. Bylaws require each purchaser must be approved by the board of directors, which manages the corporation. Usually a minimum FICO credit score requirement of 620 is common. Most do not permit renting. If there are too many rentals, people may have difficulty obtaining financing for purchasing other units. However, there is that exception to the law that allows if 10 or more units are in the complex and the owners tried to sell for at least 4 months at a price no greater than their initial cost, and they were unable to sell it, then they're allowed to rent it. Here, let's add those words in there. Then they are allowed to rent. So long-term stability of tenants is common. Financing the purchase will be done using cash or a personal loan, not a mortgage loan, because you don't own real estate, and a mortgage loan is pledging the real estate as security for the loan. And here's another thing that we need to be aware of. Real estate agents cannot prepare the actual sales contracts of co-ops because it's not real estate, it's stock. And they must be prepared by attorneys. Now, the funny thing is I found that most attorneys don't even prepare the contracts themselves. They just, a lot of them just borrowed the New York City's housing authority condominium sales contract, and they just fill in the blank lines on it. You know, at least in my experience, there are some attorneys that have their own contracts on this, but most of them just get the contract from there and they borrow that and they just use that. So let's do the highlights here. Buyers of condos receive a deed conveying fee simple ownership of two things: their living unit from the paint on the interior walls inward, and a proportionate undivided interest in the common area elements. Now, the first condominiums were built in Puerto Rico in 1958, and the FHA was allowed to insure mortgages for condominiums by 1969. Many people were introduced to condominium ownership in Florida first, which had introduced it from the concept that Puerto Rico had. Popularity stems from the ability to obtain affordable housing, often in highly desirable areas that are typically beyond most people's economic reach. Imagine buying on the beach in Florida. You know, who could afford that? But a condominium can make it significantly more affordable. So chief among the common elements of condos are the land and the exterior of the buildings. Common property can also include the hallways, basements, elevators, stairwells, driveways, private roads, sidewalks, lawns, landscaping, and the recreational facilities. In many respects, condo ownership can be regarded in the same light of a single detached house. Title can be held in severalty, by the entirety, or as joint tenants, or as tenants in common. The unit receives an individual tax bill and may be mortgaged as a house would be. The owners place a separate insurance policy on their living space. Income tax advantages are identical for those of single-family homes, and the owners are free to sell the property, lease it, give it away, or leave it to their heirs. Each unit is a financial entity on its own, and if an adjoining unit is foreclosed, no obligation is incurred by the other condo unit owners. Owners are, however, bound by the bylaws of the homeowners association to which all will belong. Now, as long as the rules are not unreasonable, who's to say what that is? New Jersey law permits associations to enforce their rules by fining residents who fail to comply with them. However, while condominium boards can stall or exercise a first right of refusal if it does, they rarely have the right to file to evict an owner. Monthly fees are levied for the maintenance, insurance, and management of the common elements. If unpaid, these charges become a lien against the individual unit and may even be enforced by foreclosure. Yes, and compounding attorney fees. Sometimes the condominiums, what they'll do is you didn't pay your monthly maintenance charge, they start sending it off to the attorneys. Now the attorneys are going to send you the bill for the outstanding maintenance charge, plus interest, plus a new attorney's fee of several $100s, whatever the attorney fee is for writing a letter in 5 minutes, a couple $100, I guess. And then that compounds each and every month. So you could find yourself owing thousands of dollars in a short period of time, which then they could try to collect by foreclosure. So the bylaws also set up covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or the acronym CC&Rs, for which may prohibit the sale or the display of a for sale sign, or painting your front door bright red, or putting up certain decorations or flags or plants and whatnot. The reason for this is condominiums, they like to keep everything uniform, because with uniformity, you can keep stable the values. If you have one neighbor who's a slob who puts up all kinds of crazy decorations, or they're starting to put up, free Palestine and, the flags, and they put up their rainbow flags and stuff all over the place. It starts to tick off all the other residents, but it also starts to look messy. You got people flying all these different flags for other nonsense out there. And then they put up decorations, or they're hanging their clothes out to dry on the banisters or the railings. The place starts to look dirty, run down. It could affect your neighbor's value. So they have these CC&Rs, these covenants, conditions, and restrictions that you must follow to maintain the value for the other residents that are there. And sometimes these condo complexes, they can really get, it says as long as the rules are not unreasonable. Now, what is unreasonable? It's kind of subjective, right? I sold a lot of condominiums in my time. I actually specialized in it for a while. I even started marketing myself as the condo king. I know it sounds cheesy, but hey, you're specializing, you find your niche and you go with it. And I got a lot of business out of it, marketing myself as the condo king, and it worked pretty good. I sold a lot of condominiums, and I learned about the nuances between the different condo complexes and units and all that. And I found that there's you could have two units in the same building that look exactly the same, updates and everything exactly the same, but one is significantly a higher value than the others. And it has nothing to do with the location of it. They're in the same building. You know, they could be next door to each other. But when they have a deeded parking spot and they may have a deeded storage unit in a basement or some other location in the complex. So those things add value to that unit. So when we're getting listings at condos, you should ask those owners if is there something different about your unit that makes yours more valuable than the others. Okay. So condominiums are governed by the board of directors, consisting of often elected volunteers who actually live in the building. I guess they got a lot of extra free time on their hands to try to be volunteers of like politicians, to act like politicians, right? So as fiduciaries, they have the responsibility of loyalty, care, and the duty to protect their communities. So it's kind of like elected politicians, right? In town, you got a city, we elect a city council, a mayor, and they run the town. Condos are like their own little city within a city. We elect people who are owners of units in that community who want to help run it. And hopefully, it community, and not because of nepotism and trying to get a financial gain. What I have found is most people that live in condos, unless they're looking to upgrade because their family is increasing in size, most of them love their community and they don't want to sell. But often they end up resorting to selling because of those that they elected to be on the board of directors of the condominium association. They start making up these ridiculous rules. They run the place like a bunch of Nazis, walking around with clipboards and moving stations that you have and all your business, and then giving you fines and warnings and penalties. The power goes straight to their head. If you're going to buy a condo complex, somebody, you have a client, they want to buy a condominium, they should be asking questions to other people who live there that they may see in the parking lot or what have you. Asking them, hey, how is this complex managed? Do the board of directors really bust your chops here? Or do they run your facility nice? I mean, it looks nice on the outside, but what's going on? Is there drama on the inside? This is why we also, when people are purchasing condos, the attorneys for the buyer will request a copy of the rules, the CC&Rs, all those bylaws, and they'll also need the financials prepared by an accountant for the last few years. Now, I asked an attorney out of curiosity, because this is something the attorneys always do. So I asked an attorney out of curiosity, dealing with so many condos that I was selling. I asked them, what are you looking for in the financials? When you request the financials, what is it that you're looking for? And they say, well, we want to see how much money is in the reserve account. And we want to see if there's any lawsuits going on with the complex. We want to see if there's any, we want to see how much money is in the reserve account and how much it costs to maintain the complex monthly. If there should be at least 2 to 3 months of money in the reserve account, where if they don't take in another penny, that they could operate the complex and manage the complex for 2 to 3 months if there was no money to come in at all. Because if there's not, it's being mismanaged. And you know the monthly maintenance fee is going to be going up soon. Good to know. Right? That's a good bit of information for us to know. All right, so let's take a look and see what else we got here. Okay, establishing condominiums. How do you create a condo? Let's highlight this on page 127. if you buy a land of land and you want to make a condo complex, how do you do it? Well, in New Jersey, the creation of condominiums is regulated by the state's Horizontal Properties Act and the Condominium Act. So the New Jersey Condominium Act applies to condominiums associations created after January 7th, 1970. First, the owners of the property execute and record a master deed, and they file it in the public records in the county where the property is located. And many items have to be contained in or attached to that master deed, including a legal description of the land, the graphic drawing descriptions of the buildings and the other improvements, which identify each individual unit by letter, name, or number, or a combination of them both, and specifies a percentage of the common elements, if any, are to be included in the ownership of each unit. A description of the common elements, and a provision for association of unit owners, and a list of the bylaws. To start out. You know, they could add more rules as time goes on. All right, so here, I got a slide here for you explaining the details that we just covered and highlights over several pages for condo ownership. Let me just copy this over to notes. And so what do you get when you buy into a condominium? You receive a deed for fee simple ownership of two things. Your living unit from the paint on the interior walls inward, and a proportionate undivided interest in the common area elements. So what do you own? Everything from the four walls, from the paint on the four walls inward, and a proportionate interest in the common area elements. In other words, you can't start breaking the walls and doing improvements behind the walls and tapping into the plumbing and doing things of that nature, because that plumbing is common and it's attached to other living units. You can't have you messing with that. You would need to get the permission from the HOA, the homeowners association, before you start doing anything like that. So what is an HOA? It's a homeowners association, and all unit owners will become members of it. And bylaws, or covenants, conditions, and restrictions, they set up those CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. These are the rules and regulations created by the HOA that all the property owners need to follow. If they don't follow those rules, they could be subjected to fines. Generally speaking, you cannot do an open house in a condo complex, not unless it's by appointment, because you can't put up for sale signs or put up those directional arrows with balloons leading to the unit that's for sale. So it becomes kind of difficult to do. Now, on the coming slide, I have a goof of all the invasive rules, or some of the invasive rules that condominium complexes come up with. You know, here's some examples of them. They could prohibit you from putting up a for sale sign, or painting your front door a wacky color, or prohibiting oversized or commercial vehicles from parking in the lots, or not allowing decorations in the flower pot, like a flag or something, or car wraps, etc. You know, there is some truth to many stereotypes, and this is no difference. There is a commercial here I'm going to show you where I think it's like a Geico commercial where they goof on these invasive rules that condominium complexes come up with. All right, condo owners have to pay the monthly HOA fees that'll pay for those CAM charges, the common area maintenance charge to maintain the property. And if left unpaid, they could be enforced by foreclosure. Most condo complexes are managed and operated by homeowners association. They have their own board of directors there, but professional management is usually hired if there's more than 25 units in the complex, but not always. Okay. Here's this commercial. Anybody ever see this Geico commercial here? Check this thing out.
Oh, we love our new home. Neighborhood's great.
Amazing school district. The HOA has been very involved. These shrubs aren't board approved. You need to break down your cardboard.
Thank you.
Violation. Violation.
I see you've met Cynthia.
At least Geico makes bundling our home and car insurance easy.
It does help us save a bunch of money.
2 inches over regulation.
Thanks, Cynthia.
For bundling made easy.
I mean, they are goofing on these condos big time. They're goofing on these associations in some of their very restrictive rules that they create, and some of these people who are writing these fines and enforcing the rules. This is the way they act. Would you want to live there like that? I mean, they're maintaining the place, but this is a little bit ridiculous. This is a little bit overboard. Now, one thing you'll notice here, let me back up in this commercial. Look at the house behind them. Let me see if we could fast forward a little bit where that guy was walking that baby, and you could see some other houses there in the distance. These are single family houses. This is not attached housing in this condo complex. So there's single family houses, or sometimes there's two buildings with 2 units connected, and there's a bunch of buildings like that together. Duplexes or single family houses. The differences lie in what makes it a condo is the form of ownership. It's fee simple ownership, but there are rules of the HOA you need to follow. Now, here's some more examples of ridiculous, invasive rules. Would you think it's a little bit ridiculous for a condo association to require you to keep your garage door open during the day?
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of, wait a minute. Isn't that like a security issue too? People can break into your house and steal your stuff. You can let rodents, mice, or squirrels, or all kinds of things into your house now if you leave it open. Well, here is one of course, it was in California. Leave it to California. So there was a condo complex here in California. Check that out. Look at that image there. HOA makes homeowners leave garage doors open for a truly silly reason. They want to make sure you're not finishing it out and renting it. Okay, so look, most people, they park their car in the garage, or they store crap there, and it's like the opposite of your house. Why do you want to keep the door open for the world to see? The association here wanted to institute a $200 fine for every day that you're not leaving your garage door open between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. That's crazy.
How often could they add these new rules and stuff? Because I'm assuming when you move in, you get the whole list of stuff that you need to do. How often could the management change around these things?
Every meeting, they could come up with a vote. They could propose a new rule and then put it up for a vote, and then they could pass it.
Oh,
Building
so
up,
it can happen daily or monthly.
yeah. Well, often they have their meetings, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of
And
crazy.
how about like who has liability for what gets stolen, if anything?
Yeah, good question. It's a good question. I don't have an answer for it, but it's a good question. Guess that's why you got to have insurance, huh? How about this one? This one's kind of weird. One kind of association wanted to put in, so they charged each unit owner $500 for new mailboxes. Can they do that? Sure. The association wanted to do some repairs. They wanted to put all new siding or replace all the windows with storm windows and storm doors and put in new and pave new walkways. And they were going to bill each individual unit owner $10,000. Can your HOA do that?
I guess so.
They can. Your HOA can do that. They call that a special assessment. Now, we didn't get to the tax chapter yet, but people who pay property taxes, there's a general real estate tax that everybody in town needs to pay. But if your politicians in your city decide that they wanted to change the lighting, make it look like old world street lamp lighting, the historic lighting, and make it LED lights though. And if they wanted to now change all the curbs and put in the little ramps so they got wheelchair access and stuff, and they wanted to do like kinds of like put fluorescent paint across the streets and put flashing lights as stop signs and do things of that nature, but they needed the money to do it. They could assess, it's called a special assessment. It's a tax on all the property owners who live in the area, just the ones that live in the area where they want to do these improvements. They could create a tax to bill you to pay for the improvements that they want to do. You have a say in it. You could attend your city town hall meetings and be like, nope, I vote against that. And we're going to vote you out of office if you do pass these things, putting these additional expenses on us. Who's our councilman in our area? We're going to vote you out if you agree to this stuff. That's your option. But most people, how many people here have gone to town hall meetings in your town? Anybody?
Not me.
Just once when they wanted to build up a whole apartment building across the street.
So once because you had one particular issue that you became aware of, right? But most people, they don't go to these town hall meetings. And they're always passing legislation, little town ordinances about parking, about where you could park, about all kinds of stuff. Maybe they want to open up a pet park or do improvements or widen the sidewalks, which gives you less parking on the streets, which they do that stuff in my town. They could pass ordinances for all kinds of stuff. They passed ordinances to buy cameras. You remember the red light cams that happened all over the state that they said would improve the safety on the roads for the people who are running red lights, and instead it caused more accidents because people are slamming on their brakes because they didn't want to get a ticket. You guys remember that? Those red light cams? Well, my town actually came up with an idea of having cameras for parking in areas where there's like timed parking where you could only park like in the front of a post office. You could park your car there to run in, buy postage, or drop off a letter or something. They give you 15 minutes. Well, they installed these stick cams. They call them stick cams. They look like one of those bollards that they put up. It's just like it looks like a piece of concrete. Those metal uprights with that are filled with concrete. It looks like that, but it actually has a camera built into it, and it takes pictures of you and it times your vehicle. It takes pictures of your license plate, times of how long it's been sitting there, and if it doesn't move for more than 15 minutes, snaps a picture, and you get a ticket in the mail. Yeah, look at that. Electronic meter maids. AI meter maids. And the taxpayers in town paid for it. Why? Because they passed it at a city council meeting where nobody attended. And they start doing all this stuff on their own. Well, condominium complexes can do the same thing. If they decide that they want to, update the complex, redo the sidewalks and maybe change everybody's storm doors and windows and maybe put in new railings and do stuff like that. Where's the money going to come from? Well, they could issue a special assessment just like a city could on all the property owners. And if you don't have all that money to cough up right now, that's okay. They get spread it over a period of time. So your monthly maintenance charge will be higher until it's paid off. So when the owner goes to sell, we as real estate agents, it's important for us to make sure to ask, are there any outstanding special assessments that have not been paid off yet? Because that'll have to be calculated into the sale where the owner needs to pay it off. They can't just sell the property and put that on the new owner to pay. It's like unpaid taxes, selling your house when you didn't pay your taxes. All right, so check that one out. There's also this other one, this other ridiculous rule. Man battles his HOA for 7 years over a $500 mailbox. The guy just bought and built a pretty new mailbox for himself. But then the HOA voted that everybody's got to have the same mailbox, and they voted to get these gaudy mailboxes put in at a cost of $500 each to each homeowner. On principle, the guy said, no, I'm not doing that. I just built a brand new mailbox. Now, this guy, I believe he was, I believe he worked for NASA. He's like a NASA scientist or something in Maryland, Bowie, Maryland. So in 2009, Keith Strong received a letter at his home about a new mailbox for $500. He fought it in court for 7 years. They wanted these mailboxes to be put in at $500 a pop. He fought it. He just bought himself a nice new mailbox for $35. He was a solar physicist with NASA. He paid $35 for a charming mailbox and a functional cedar mailbox just months earlier. Wasn't buying that line of paying $500 for a mailbox. So he fought it in court. So 7 years later, and $33,000 in legal fees, roughly the price of 66 of those fancy $500 mailboxes he refused to buy, he won this case. He said, I care about the precedent, he tells us. We just put a new roof on our house that cost over $100,000. What would stop our HOA from coming back and saying, we don't like your cedar roof. We'd like you to put on a roof that matches the roofs and put a different roof on. So he actually fought that in court and he won. But this stuff can get pretty crazy. Is what is construed as reasonable restrictions that the HOA puts on these unit owners, right? So, okay, let's move on. So once again, this is just a recap of condominium ownership. Condos are regulated, the creation of condos are regulated by the New Jersey Horizontal Properties Act and the Condominium Act. Certain tenants may not be evicted during conversions. That's like if you buy an apartment building or a multifamily house and convert it to condos. Certain tenants cannot be evicted during those conversions. Owners of a condo have income tax advantages identical to those of single-family homeowners. And condos can be any architectural style. The differences arise from the form of ownership. And here's a definition again for reserves. It's an amount of money saved up for emergencies and repairs. It is extra money built into the monthly maintenance fee. Both condominiums and cooperatives have them. There should be at least 2 to 3 months operating expenses to run the entire complex in the reserve account. Otherwise, it's probably being mismanaged and your monthly fee may be going up in the future. Now, how does that happen? How does it get mismanaged? Well, anybody ever go down to City Hall in your town for whatever reason? And you ever notice that a lot of people that work down at City Hall are related? You ever notice that? A lot of these people are related.
Yeah.
How did they get those jobs there? Aren't they supposed to post them? Aren't they legally required to post them on public job boards to get the best candidates? But yet we always get, you see a mother working down there side by side with her kid. She got her kid a job working for the city at City Hall. How does that happen? It's called nepotism. Nepotism means we didn't put the job out there for the best candidates. Instead, we gave it to someone we knew because we know somebody with pull, right? With influence. And the same thing happens in condo associations. These people, they get on the board and they say, all right, we need a new landscaper. And one lady says, well, my husband owns a landscaping business. Let's make him the landscaper for the complex. Okay, everybody good with that? Okay, done. Because most people don't attend these meetings, so these people just making up their own rules and voting amongst themselves and implementing these rules on everybody. And then you get another guy, he's like, well, my wife's an attorney. How about we put her as the attorney on retainer for the complex in case we need an attorney? Okay, done, quick. So they're not actually taking bids from contractors who maybe can offer better service at a cheaper price. And they're taking bids, these sealed bids, in order to on what they're willing to charge. And then the association can look it over and take the best one. Instead, they're just doing it by nepotism. Oh yeah, you know this person, your wife's an attorney, your husband's a landscaper. Yeah, let's give them the jobs. And they may not be charging the best fee or doing the best job. That's unfortunately what happens in some of these places. Okay. So here I put together a chart for the difference between a condominium and a co-op. So, in a condo, let's see, you own real estate when you own a condo, not when you own a cooperative. You own stock and you get a proprietary lease to occupy that space that you're living in. You get a monthly mortgage bill with a condominium. With a cooperative, it has to be cash or a personal loan. You get a tax bill with a condo. You do not on a co-op because you don't own real estate. You get a monthly maintenance CAM charge fee with condominiums. You also do with condos, but they're much higher because they include the underlying mortgage and tax bill that the corporation gets. They pass on those payments to all the tenant shareholders. An HOA application is required for approval to buy into the complex, not with condos, but with co-ops. Minimum credit scores may be required, not with condos, but with co-ops. The management is a homeowners association with condominiums and a board of directors in a cooperative. Condos, you got to pay your own homeowners insurance. Co-ops, you get renters insurance. Condos can be rented out. Co-ops, they cannot. Not unless it's not against your particular cooperative rules, or if the complex has 10 units or more and you've been trying to sell it at a price no greater than what you bought it for at least 4 months, then you may be allowed to rent. Income tax advantages are identical for both. And your neighbors can be affected if you don't pay your monthly maintenance charges in a co-op, but not in condos. Because the monthly maintenance charge in a co-op includes perhaps the underlying mortgage payment and taxes. And if they're not collecting enough money because tenants are defaulting or not making those important payments, the corporation may not be collecting enough money to pay those important bills. And it may lead to the entire complex getting foreclosed. All right, so who cannot be evicted from a condominium conversion? Well, if tenants meet all of these requirements, and the complex is getting the building or complex is being converted to condos. If tenants meet all of these following criteria, they could remain as tenants for the next 40 years, and they cannot be evicted. People age 62 and older, or those with certain disabilities, if they lived there for at least 2 years before the condo conversion began, and their income is no more than 3 times their county's per capita average income, or in any case, no higher than $50,000 a year. If they meet all those requirements and they're doing a condominium conversion, these people cannot be evicted for 40 years. They could remain as tenants renting for the next 40 years. I think I saw a Law and Order episode about this once. They killed that person because they wouldn't move out, and the real estate became so valuable. You guys recall seeing a Law and Order episode like that one time? Maybe they were paying $500 a month rent or whatever the hell it was in a complex that's worth millions now. Yeah. Okay, so that kind of scenario. So let me put this in the notes. Condo conversions. And let me also throw the after lunch attendance poll. Let's get that out there now. I know we got some people falling asleep on us here. Let's see if you could wakey and answer your attendance poll. Thank you. Wow, that was quick. Great. Awesome. And if anybody wanted to grab a screenshot of this, it's probably the cleanest explanation you'll get for condominium conversion and who cannot be evicted when there's a condominium conversion. I'll leave it up for a second. Okay. So now we'll highlight this in the book about condominium conversions and who cannot be evicted. And then you should also highlight this beneath it. Condo owners receive a deed and therefore they own real estate. Co-op owners receive shares in stock and a proprietary lease, which are both personal property, and therefore they technically do not own real estate. I could foresee an exam question coming from that. We're almost done with this chapter. We're getting there. Anybody need more time, or we're good?
No,
Got
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. You ever hear of a townhouse? Anybody know what a townhouse is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A townhouse is not a form of ownership. It's an architectural style. That's all it is. Condominium is not an architectural style. It is a form of ownership. It's fee simple ownership with a homeowners association and rules that you need to follow. So looking at a complex gives you no idea of whether it is a condominium or what form of ownership it is. It could be a townhouse complex where the townhouses are condos. There's a association, monthly maintenance fee. They take care of the exterior of the building, etc. Or the townhouse, the architectural style could just be fee simple ownership, where each individual owner is responsible for maintaining the exterior of their buildings. There's no management that's doing this. You got to cut that little strip of grass in front of your unit. Now, if you got bushes there, you're required to trim your own bushes and such. So because of this, the maintenance may not be exactly the same for each unit. So even though they say in the book here, it's impossible to tell the form of ownership simply by looking at a complex, sometimes you could get a clue. Because if each individual unit owner is responsible for maintaining the exterior of their unit as well as the interior, some of them aren't going to maintain it as well. And that gives you a clue that it's fee simple ownership and it's not a condominium. Okay, everybody got these highlights?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okey doke. Let me grab them, actually. Put them in a note. All right, got it. So a condominium is a form of ownership and a townhouse is an architectural style. That's the difference. You'll need to go know it for exam because they always put it on exam because people are always screwing it up. Okay, so I'll tell you right now, we see it on exam. Knowing the difference between a condo and a townhouse. Condominium is a form of ownership. Fee simple ownership with rules created by the HOA that you need to follow. Townhouse is an architectural style.
But generally, in the people are saying, yes, we are living on the townhome, we are purchasing townhome, we are selling townhome. So, what that means? But like as you say, the townhouse is only a style. That means condominium, and then say, the owner can sell and buy his home whenever he wants.
So a condo is a form of ownership. You could have a townhouse that is a condo. They all, but not always. So condominium is a form of ownership. It has an HOA in charge of maintaining the common area elements.
Yeah.
And usually the exterior of the buildings.
Yeah.
They do all the landscaping, snow removal. Not all condo complexes do. Some of them put that on the property owner too, to do the maintenance of the exterior and the snow removal and stuff. It really depends on your association's rules and if they have landscapers to do these things. Okay.
Yeah.
So condos, they have rules the owners must follow. Those CC&Rs that are set up in the bylaws. Now, house is an architectural style. It's not a form of ownership. It is multi-level attached housing where multiple units are connected to each other. They share that common party wall that we learned about. So townhouses could be fee simple ownership or they can be condominiums. Often they are condos. So the owner doesn't have to cut their own grass, remove their snow, maintain the exterior of the building or roof or gutters, etc. That's managed by the HOA. They can simply be fee simple ownership without an HOA, in which case the owner would be responsible for maintaining their part of the common area and their exterior elements. How do you know? Well, you'd know if you bought in. Or sometimes.
So wherever HOA, that is the.
Yeah, if there's an HOA, it's a condo. The townhouse is a condo.
Yeah. Okay.
But simply looking at the complex usually gives you no clue as to whether that townhouse is a condo or fee simple ownership. But like I said, when it's fee simple ownership, sometimes you could get a clue. Take a look at this next slide. These are 100-year-old townhouses in my town on the main street, on Stiles Street in Linden. They have alternating color patterns. Okay, you could have condominiums with alternating color patterns as well. There's 2 units per each building here, but look at this. If you look closer, they have different doors. They have different railings. Not just a look or color, but different types. They have different types of stairs. Different doors. Different roof styles. Different shingles versus siding up here. Look, this one's putting down some white stone. This one got some kind of dirt and other rocks, and there's pots. If you look further, this is another picture of that same complex with all the units. Look at this one at the end. It's got some lattice there falling apart for the enclosed porch. Some have porches, some don't. The different roof styles, different colors. You know, condominiums may have alternating patterns, but it'll look nice and neat. Look at this one. This guy looks like he had some spare siding. He needed to replace some, so he put a color that doesn't even match right. Look, it looks like the same thing here. Yeah. See this? They didn't even trim the bushes or the grass. Some of the other ones, they're nicely trimmed. Other ones, they're not. You could get an idea. This is not a condominium. This is just fee simple ownership. And I do know this because I know a girl that lives here. And she said, yeah, these are rentals. She's renting it. It's these are 100-year-old townhouses here.
I used to live in one of those, but years ago they used to be army barracks in here in Edison. So they kind of look like that, but they're like separate houses with like split. Like the other half is a different property, the other half is a different property, but it's under the same house.
The duplex. They call that a duplex. It's side by side. It's a 2-family house with 2 units side by side, right?
Yeah.
Those are called duplexes.
Duplexes.
If you're going to get a mortgage loan for them, the lenders offer of the HOA's rules and such. And you could be like, wait a minute, there is no HOA. It's a 2-family house. But the thing is, lenders consider any attached housing is usually a condominium, part of a condominium complex. So they could bust chops sometimes and ask for that. And then you'd have to, you know, I guess, write some sort of a formal letter. We had to do this several occasions. We sold these townhouses, these duplexes, and we had to write a letter that it's fee simple ownership. There is no HOA involved here. In order to get these loans from the bank without supplying to them additional information to get the complex approved. Because you cannot get a loan to buy into a condominium complex unless the majority of the units, there's certain information they want. They want to make sure that the construction was made up to a certain standard. They want to make sure that the majority of the units are owner occupants. At least 51% of the units have to be owner occupants. They're looking for certain insurance and management and the rules and guidelines before a complex. You have to submit an application to get a complex approved in order to get like FHA loans, you know, or the VA loans. The complex needs to be approved first. But in a duplex, it may be just fee simple ownership. There is no HOA. And then you got to give them a note explaining that. And once you get them to agree to it, then they could agree to give you that loan. Okay. So townhouse is simply an architectural style. It's not a form of ownership. It's multi-level attached housing, shares a common party wall. Townhouses could also be condos, but they could be fee simple ownership as well. And it's possible to tell simply by looking at it's impossible to tell simply by looking at a structure, although sometimes, like in this case, you can have a clue based on the units and their condition. If they're not all the same, if they're not cared for the same, and they have different features and such, I mean, you could get a pretty good idea. It's not a condominium, those townhouses. All right, all right. So, timeshares. Anybody ever hear of a timeshare before? Time sharing or timeshares? Let's just highlight this title, time sharing, and right next to it is a form of ownership. Page 127. Time sharing is a form of ownership. We're not going to read through it. Instead, I got a couple of videos to show you and explain to you what a timeshare is and if it's good to buy into them or not. I'd say stay away from them. They were good at one point in time, but today I would say stay away from them. Once you get your real estate license, you might have people approach you asking you if you sell timeshares or if you could sell a timeshare. And you think that you're in real estate that you can, but I would say I would avoid them. You probably don't have the resources to sell it. And they could be a pain in the neck, and they could take a long time to sell. They could be very difficult to sell. There are timeshare companies that specialize in resale of timeshares. Don't ever buy a brand new timeshare. Most often, even in new complexes, you could probably buy a used one that someone's already trying to dump for pennies on the dollar. Or they may even be paying you to take it over. They'll pay you. So, a timeshare buyer has the right to cancel a timeshare contract up to 7 days after signing the contract, but that's only for the new construction timeshares, the brand new ones. You know, the real estate in New Jersey, the developer or timeshare salesperson is required to provide honest, not false information, to not make any predictions of increases in value or misrepresent how the buyer may use or exchange the timeshares. New Jersey Real Estate Timeshare Act does not apply to 10 or fewer timeshare interests. Investments of less than $3,000 or to resales, not the new initial sale of a timeshare. The Bureau of Subdivided Land Sales Control, which is part of the New Jersey Real Estate Commission, enforces the registration and anti-fraud provisions of the New Jersey Real Estate Sales Full Disclosure Act. So they regulate the sales of these timeshares. Before you could offer an out-of-state property for sale in New Jersey or a timeshare, it needs to be registered with the Real Estate Commission, insured, bonded, all that stuff, before we could offer it for sale. Okay, you guys got the notes done?
Yeah, got it.
Okay. So here, time sharing is a form of ownership for a short period of time each year. You could own 1 week out of the year, 2 weeks, a month. It depends on the complex and how they set up the ownership structure and the sales. Okay. It could be for a specific week of the year that you own it, and you got to use it that week every year. So you got to plan your vacation to use it regularly, because you're one of 52 owners of the property. So I guess you could get it cheaper, huh? But what's the maintenance fee going to be like? The maintenance charge, you know? Not if you're buying new construction. You usually buy these things up front, you don't even know yet. What are the taxes going to be like? Don't know yet. All right, so let me just copy this in the notes. There we go. There we have it. So the penalties for licensees that violate timeshare laws, the minimum is $250 fine with a maximum of $50,000 per offense for out-of-state subdivided land and timeshare sales violations, which are covered under Title 45, Chapter 15-16.50 and 45:15-16.79. Those are the statutes within the law that cover timeshare sales. So the minimum fine possible is $250 with a maximum of $50,000 per offense. Here, we got a couple of videos now to show you about timeshare sales. You may have seen this guy's commercial on TV or heard it on the radio.
If you bought a timeshare for your family, by now you've learned the ugly truth. Timeshares are the only thing that you can buy that you don't know how much it's
Yeah, let me make sure I'm sharing the computer sound. Oh, I am. Okay.
going to cost or when it's going to end. It's like giving them a blank check for annual maintenance and assessment fees. Sounds crazy, right? The ugly truth is that this never ends. Hello, I'm Chuck McDowell, and 10 years ago, I founded Wesley Financial Group with one goal in mind, helping good folks just like you cancel their timeshare contract. And what that means for you and your family, no more mortgage payments, no more maintenance fee surprises, and no more timeshare. So call today.
So this guy used to be involved in timeshare sales, and now he's helping people get out of them. So the rest of this, now there's a 3-part series of videos here I'm going to show you that explain to you the timeshare industry and how it works. And this is these series were created by this guy's Wesley Financial. They created this the Great American Timeshare Scam series here. So let's watch these. They're pretty entertaining and very informative if you've never heard of timeshares or not exactly sure how they work. Let's take a look at this.
Well, we have a consumer warning to tell you about this afternoon for anyone who's trying to sell a timeshare.
Probably heard horror stories of folks going into a timeshare sales pitch and being stuck there for hours.
The maintenance fees were going up 12.5% every single year.
This is the Great American Timeshare Scam. Like most bad things, timeshare started out with really good intentions. But greed, deception, and manipulation has distorted this once creative tool that helped families vacation and turned it into a lifetime of debt for millions of families. In the 60s and 70s, timeshare was a brand new, innovative way to fund property development. And for a while, the system worked. Resorts popped up everywhere, with families owning fixed-week timeshares at a reasonable cost. So what changed? Timeshare companies became obsessed with the bottom line. Profits, money, commissions. Oh my. And now, this steal of a deal, own your vacation, you just bought a house scheme is bribing people to attend sales meetings and deceiving families into a loan that can never be repaid. Thanks for watching. This was actually just part 1 of a 3-part series on the most deceptive practices within the timeshare industry. If you're interested in learning more, watch part 2. the dark psychology of the timeshare sales meeting. In that video, we go over the manipulative and dishonest tools the timeshare salesmen use to make the sale, to make you buy. Spoiler alert, it's not a sales pitch, it's a show.
Ooh, get your attention.
Well, we have a consumer.
There we go.
You own your house, why wouldn't you own your vacation? Deals like this come once in a lifetime, and you won't have access to it once you step out of this meeting.
If you've ever sat through a timeshare presentation, you've likely heard this phrase or something like it before. This technique is called the exploding offer, or what is more commonly known as FOMO. And unfortunately, it's not the only technique they're using on you to make the deal. This is the dark psychology of the timeshare sales meeting. So, how do people find themselves in awful timeshare situations? Simple. Timeshare salesmen understand humanity's dark psychology. For example,
if you don't do this now, this deal may run out and be gone forever.
What does your brain instinctively want to do now that you've heard this?
Do it before it's too late.
This tactic is known as the scarcity effect. Scarcity pushes people to make impulsive decisions like buying up all the toilet paper during a global pandemic because...
What if we run out of all the toilet paper?
Right. Very rational. We're not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, but generally a feeling of regret follows impulse buys. Stop me if you know it. Buyer's remorse. Another example is the law of reciprocity, where people feel obligated to stay for the sales meeting because they were given free tickets to an event or a free dinner. This is why they... Watch the glass. This is why they bribe people to come to the sales presentation, because it makes people feel like they should give back their time in exchange for these gifts. And these are just a few examples of the dark psychology timeshare salesmen use. They are masters of persuasion. This is why it's so important to be aware of the psychological influences that affect decision making. That way, you never find yourself in a timeshare presentation to begin with.
Ready for vacations for life?
Keep on walking, pal. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned. You just finished part 2 of our 3-part series on the deceptive practices to look out for in the timeshare industry. The next video is the timeshare contract. In that video, we go over why the timeshare companies will pressure you into that first sale, because once they've got you, they're not going to let you go, at least not without a fight.
All right, ready for part 3. Here it comes.
You own your house.
Timeshare's an investment. You'll be able to rent it out. You'll be able to travel anywhere you want for life. This is the timeshare contract. I'm gonna save you the heartache and explain why the timeshare companies try so hard to sell you timeshare. Because the first sale is just the beginning of the ultimate con that's about to destroy your finances. Let's start with the low-hanging fruit. If they can convince you to buy a timeshare, they're guaranteed consistent yearly income without having to give you anything but imaginary points. What a deal for the timeshare company, right? Free maintenance paid for by you for their property that they actually own. They're called maintenance fees, and they go up every single year. A big fat commission because timeshare barely costs the company anything. Seriously, sometimes that salesperson is getting over 30%. And get this, once they've got you, it's nearly impossible to get out. If you try to cancel, they'll tell you they can't do anything. You signed a contract. They may even tell you to sell it yourself. They definitely won't buy it back. They don't want it, and they know it has no value. But if you try to sell it, it turns out no one else actually wants to buy it either. Spoiler alert, there is no market for timeshare resales. None, zero, zilch, nil market for it. Look at this eBay listing for a timeshare. For $1. We've even seen people offer gift cards to take their timeshare. No, I'm good, man.
But it's an investment.
Get out of here! What's crazier is that these timeshares still won't sell, so families are stuck in the timeshare scam, paying all their outrageous fees. And then, when they finally had enough, they're out more money for another service to help them get rid of it. Now, hypothetically, hang with me here, let's say you actually did get that timeshare sold. This means someone else now has your timeshare, which is perfect, right? You no longer have to deal with this financial burden. But there could be a catch, and we've seen this happen over and over. If the person who bought your timeshare stops paying and the timeshare company comes calling, guess who could be on the hook for all of that debt? Yep, the original owner of the timeshare. Oh, shh. And I say this to really show you how hard getting out of a timeshare is. There are plenty of other stories and examples of this kind of unfortunate situation, but I think you get the sad point. Oftentimes, once an owner has tried a couple different avenues to get out, they begin to lose hope. This is what the timeshare companies count on. They want you to sit down, shut up, and pay them your money without actually getting anything in return. They seem more like a mafia than a reputable business.
I'm going to sell you a timeshare you can't refuse.
But thankfully, you don't have to be hopeless. It seems like one of the only ways you can actually cancel your timeshare and all its related debt and fees is through a timeshare exit company. It isn't easy, and it can take up to 3 years, but it is possible. The only caveat per se is that it needs to be a reputable company. There are a few good ones out there, but as these timeshare exit companies have gotten bigger, the timeshare companies have actually started suing them into oblivion. We know this for a fact because they sued us too, but we beat them in federal court for the right to help people like you get relief from the burden of the never-ending lies and fees. This video series only scratches the surface on the most deceptive practices within the timeshare industry. If you want more videos like this, hit that like button. And if you have experienced any of these tactics yourself, tell your story below. It helps people understand that they are not alone, and the situation they found themselves in is nothing to be embarrassed about. Also, if you haven't seen the other videos in this series yet, make sure to check out The Great American Timeshare Scam and The Dark Psychology of the Timeshare Meeting. What you discover may shock you.
Well, that was pretty informative, huh? What'd you guys think of that? Learn something about timeshares?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Anybody here ever go to one of those timeshare presentations?
I haven't yet. Never.
No? I went to one for the hell of it once. I was in Las Vegas, and I used that as an opportunity to go to one just to observe the sales skills, because I know they're highly trained salespeople at these things, and I wanted to use it as a learning experience to try to see what their tactics were, you know. And in the process, I figured I'd see if I could gain an advantage on them, because I know what they're all about. And it was interesting, the one I went to, they put us all in a room, and they did there was a speaker, did a little presentation, and then they put up a video, and we were all watching the video. They dimmed the lights, and we all did watching of this video. And one thing I did is I noticed that this timeshare presentation wasn't like the ones in the past where people, the salespeople would sit next to you to answer any questions you'd have. But they did have cameras in the ceiling pointing down at the crowd. So the people who are watching the timeshare presentation were being watched by the salespeople in the room next door with the cameras on the monitors. So when you were like, oh yeah, honey, look at that. Now they're taking their notes and they know which buttons to press when the presentation is over and you meet up with them to answer their questions about timeshares. You know, it's a high pressure sales tactics that they use. So it was pretty interesting. And one thing you'll notice if you ever go to timeshare presentations, the salespeople are very highly trained salespeople. But the first, I like to refer to it as a 3-ring circus, because there's 3 rounds of salespeople you need to go through before you could get the heck out of there. You know, usually they bribe you to come to these timeshare presentations by offering you free tickets to a show or dinner or something like they said in that presentation there. But what I did is I went to one of these presentations and I was listening to it and everything. The first round of people the salespeople that you hook up with after that, you'll find out that even though they're highly trained salespeople, they look like models. They're very beautiful people. The girls, the guys, they're very beautiful looking people. And that's part of the pressure tactic that they use, because it's hard to say no to someone you're attracted to. It's hard to try to come off as cheap in front of a beautiful person that you're attracted to. So this is why it's actually part of their sales tactic. The first round of people are usually very beautiful people. Then the next round of people are usually a little bit more experienced, maybe a little bit older. So they have a little more, it's not about the looks. We got past the looks. You managed to get past the looks and defeat their beautiful people. So now you got to deal with a little more experienced salespeople to get to the past them, which they con off as their managers, okay, before you could get your free stuff and get out of there. And then if you manage to get past that one, then they're going to walk you to the ultimate manager's room that you could deal with, where he could give you your free tickets and show stuff, and then you could be on your way. And so what they'll do is they'll walk you off into a room, an isolated room that just you are in. Now, I didn't think to look, but I bet there was a camera in that room watching me, because as I'm sitting in there cooling off after dealing with these high pressure salespeople for a while, I'm like, where the hell did this guy go? Where is he? So as I start standing up, ready to go look for him, I was like, where the hell is this guy? I start standing up. All of a sudden, he suddenly appears in the doorway. And he's like, hey, how are you guys doing? And he's this old guy with doing the chicken rubberneck thing, and he's like, hey, how are you guys doing? And he's acting really goofy that you can't help but smile. Okay. But that was his job. That was his only goal, is to accomplish that, to make you smile, to kind of break the tension that was built up. And then he sits down. Hey, folks, what's going on? So what? You decided you don't want to purchase? I mean, you came down here for something. What, did you just come down here to get some free stuff? No, I'm just kidding with you. We'll give you that free stuff anyway. But seriously, what is it that you that you decided not to purchase? And then they start going into this whole spiel again. And then he's like, is it the price? Because I'm the manager here, the ultimate manager, the guy on the top of the totem pole. I could give you the best deal here if we could still try to make this happen. What would it take to get you to sign on the dotted line today? He's like, what if I change the price to this? So they'll take the piece of paper and they'll be like, what if I change the price to this? And he changes it out, writes it on paper, pushes it over to me and says, would that change your mind? And now he's starting to negotiate with me again. So we're still not done here, And so I'm like, no. I was like, that's still too much. And then he's like, well, you're a tough negotiator. What about if I do this? How about that? And I said, no. And he's like, well, I can't go much lower than this. This is the bottom line. This is the lowest I can go on that. Otherwise, we're not really making money on this, and we got to make something. And he's like, what about that? And I said, no. And he's like, what is it? Is it the interest rate? I realize that's kind of high, the interest rate. I can work with you a little bit on this, but I don't have too much control. What if I did this for the interest rate? And he's like crossing out and writing down a new interest rate. He's like, what if I did it for that? Could that do the deal? I said, no, I'm not interested. It's not going to do it for me. He's like, you are tough. You're a tough negotiator. How about this? I'll give you this price, and I could lower the interest rate all down to this, and you'll still get your free show tickets and your dinner. And here, would that do it for you? And I said, at that interest rate and that price, and I still get my free show tickets and the free dinner, right? He said, yep. I said, I don't know. I said, I'm here in Vegas in August. I got a couple more days here in town, and my sneakers are melting to the ground as I'm walking down the street. I said, if you could get me a rental car with air conditioning for the days I have remaining here in Vegas, and you cover that cost, and you get me tickets to the Carrot Top comedy show in my hotel, I think we could do something. And he's like, oh, we usually don't do things like this. I was like, well, then I'm not interested. Forget about it, And he's like, oh, hold on. That's not something we normally do, but let me see what I could do for you. This may take a little while, so just hang tight, okay? And I was like, all right. So he leaves the room. And he's gone for a while. And then every now and then he pokes his head and he's like, hang on, I'm still working on it. Hold on, And eventually he keeps sticking his head in, keeps going back and forth. And then eventually he walks back into the room. He's like, okay, I got good news for you. He's like, because usually the stuff that they give you, the tickets and stuff that they give you for shows and things, they're certificates redeemable for. So you usually have to mail in something to get it mailed to you. And by then you're not even in town anymore. So they never really give you the free stuff. So I told him, I was like, I don't want any certificates redeemable for nothing. I want tickets so I could enjoy it while I'm in town now. So the guy comes back and he's like, I got your tickets for the steak dinners here. I got you even an extra one. And then let's see, I got you the show tickets that we promised you before and the dinner. And here's the tickets to the Carrot Top comedy show in your hotel, and the rental car's on its way. I was like, oh, okay. Shoot, now I got to sign on the dotted line here. Okay. And I signed, and I bought the timeshare. I didn't have to put any money down, credit cards or anything like that. I just signed on the dotted line to buy the timeshare. Because I know, what is the right of rescission for out-of-state properties marketed to New Jersey residents or timeshare sales?
7 days.
7 days. I was going to be there for 3 more. So when I got home, I had the FedEx envelope between my front door and the storm door sitting there waiting for me. Before I ever unpacked my luggage, I ripped it open. I took the letter out from the top that was sitting on top of the package of all my documents, and I signed it, put it in the self-enclosed FedEx envelope with the prepaid postage, and mailed it back out to them, which was my right of rescission. I rescinded my offer to purchase, and I canceled, and I did not purchase any timeshare. I just got some extra free stuff. Hey, don't shoot the messenger. That's their game. I just played it a little better and negotiated some extra free stuff out of them. That's all I did. Hey, I have to sit, we not, so it did waste a day pretty much though, doing that. But I got some free stuff out of it. So why not? Don't hate the player, hate the game. It's their game. I just played it better, right? So if you do go to one of those presentations, or you could try pulling some stunt like that, knowing that you got 7 days to rescind, to cancel. So you guys need to familiarize yourself with architectural styles if you're going to be in the real estate business. Here's a few common architectural styles. Remember, don't confuse ownership types with styles of architectural styles like townhouses versus condos and such. Here is a link where I got this from the Realtor magazine, from Realtor's website. Here's some of the here's a different resource, but here are some of the common architectural styles you see right here in New Jersey. Cape Cod, colonials, Victorians, ranch, raised ranch, bungalows, split level, Tudors, contemporary, bi-level, townhouses, duplexes, which is the 2-family side by side that you were talking about, Brian. Then you have 2-family over and under, where one unit's above another. They call that an over-under. We have Art Deco, Craftsman, Saltbox, Dutch Colonial, Federal, Georgian, Monterey, Gothic, Greek, Pueblo, Queen Anne, apartment buildings, and high rises. These are the common architectural styles that we see here in New Jersey. Okay, this is not a full list of all different kinds of architectural styles, but probably from the most common on the left to less common, okay? But these are all common here in New Jersey. And this link will take you to the Realtors magazine on their website. So you got all kinds of real estate news, laws, ethics, all kinds of information you could get access to. Real estate scripts when you're calling people or talking to people, client education, handouts, publications, all kinds of good stuff like that. But either way, here we got the architectural style guide. And they show you some different types of architectural styles. These are some basics, but there's like several different types of Cape Cod style homes. I live in a Cape Cod style house. My house doesn't look like this. My house actually has the roof leaning forward, and then there's an attached garage to it. So there are different subclasses. There's different, there's small, medium, and large Cape Cod homes with different styles of Cape Cods itself. Bungalows, Art Deco. Like you could click on these and get a brief explanation about the architectural style. But you can try to familiarize yourself with the looks of craftsmen, colonials, Creole, Dutch colonial, federal, Georgian style. Let's see. I've seen some of these before, Greek revivals. Let's see. National. Queen Anne style. See some of them right in Galway. Salt boxes, not so common, but I've seen them. Ranches. A ranch is a single, requires a larger lot to have a ranch style house because they're single floored units. They could have basements with them, but they're single floor units. So these are great for people who have trouble climbing stairs. Okay, so these are some of the basic architectural styles. Split levels, they're very common here in New Jersey as well. There's a lot of stairs in them, like just a couple of steps at each level of the house you go into. Each room you go to, sometimes there's steps that you got to go up or down. The Tudor style, when they're smaller, can be cramped and not very convenient. But when they're a larger style, they're very beautiful. And they could have a nice layout to them when they're larger. The smaller ones, they're more cramped. Victorians, you see a lot of these, like in Rawway, Westfield, and such. Okay. And then they have a little guide here for architectural structural elements. And if you were to click on that, you could see like the different styles of arches above windows. The different styles of columns. Different dormers that go on roofs, like the window styles that stick out of roofs there, the different styles here. Different types of moldings. Different styles of roof. This is what I got on my house, the cross gable. You got front gable, gambrel, that's more of a barn style. Hips, mansard, pavilion, salt box, side gable, and then different types of window encasements. You got your box bay, your bow, your box bay, your regular bay windows, casement windows, double hung. Rarely see any of these. Anyway, it's not a great architectural style guide, but it's better than nothing. You know, so yeah, I'll share that with you, that link. In the chat window there. Those are the architectural style guides. And it also gives you the link to this page here, where you can then come here for real estate news and all kinds of other stuff. This is on the NAR website, nar.realtor, and for their magazine tools and architectural styles and such. So you can get all kinds of information here. You see scripts and things of that nature. What do we got here for scripts? the texting script that works like magic. Okay, when dealing with clients, a script for texting your past clients by Tom Ferry. Oh, Tom Ferry isn't a very expensive trainer to get training from. But they give you all kinds of scripts to ways to talk to people and such. But they say I'm too busy to make an offer or even look right now. If I can't get my X for my house, I can't afford to sell it. Okay. So anyway, they give all kinds of scenarios there, but interesting. Come on. So these are some of the common architectural styles that we have right here in New Jersey. Just add this. I gotta get around to creating my architectural style guide of my own for the students. Because most of the ones out there that I've found and come across so far, they kind of suck. Even this one that the realtor one has, but at least I got a good list of them here for you. Here's a good list of those architectural styles. All right. And that concludes chapter 7. All right. So let's do the key terms to review for chapter 7. Close out that slideshow, save the changes. Now let's do the key terms to review. There are 2 key terms to review. No edits to make really, so let's do them. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right. Me
Ready.
Okay. So key terms to review 1. Ownership.
Title.
Yeah, very good. Title is great, is another word for ownership. Default form of ownership. So 13 is A. Default form of ownership for those who are unmarried and not in a civil union.
Tenancy in common.
Yes, 11 is B. Person named in a will to inherit real estate.
Devisee.
Yes, a devisee. 2 is C. A group with each partner completely liable.
Tenancy and severalty.
No.
General partnership.
Yes, a general partnership. 3 is D. Non-married person with the right of survivorship.
Joint tenancy.
Yes, the only benefit of joint tenancy. 4 is E. That would be joint tenancy. A business owned by one person or entity.
Corporation.
Sole proprietorship.
Sole proprietorship.
Sole proprietorship. 9 is F. Co-owners join together to carry on a business.
Partnership.
Simply a partnership. 7 is G. Court-ordered sale and division.
Partition.
6 is H, a partition. Legal entity considered to be an official person.
Corporation.
A corporation. 1 is I. Process by which an owner typically receives shares of a co-owner who dies. What do we call that process?
Right of survivorship.
The right of survivorship. 8 is J. Special ownership by married couple.
Tenancy by entirety.
Tenancy by the entirety is correct. 10 is K. Real estate ownership by only one person or entity.
Tenancy.
Limited personal.
Tenancy and severalty.
Severalty. Yeah, just say several and then put a TY at the end. T. Severalty. So 12 is L. but it comes from the root word sever. Your interests are severed from all others. So tenancy and severalty. 12 is L. A group with only the general partner fully liable.
Limited partnership.
Correct. 5 is M, a limited partnership. All right, key terms 2. Everybody get those? Anybody miss any? Anybody need them? Everybody good? Okay. Key terms 2. Co-owners' rights to a specific apartment.
Proprietary lease.
A proprietary lease. 8 is A. Group elected to manage a cooperative.
Board of directors.
The board of directors, because it's owned by a corporation, and who manages the corporation? Boards of directors, right? 1 is B. An architectural term.
Townhouse.
Townhouse. 11 is C. Stairwells, roofs, etc. that are owned by all.
Common elements.
These are the common elements. 2 is D. An apartment house, an apartment whose buyers receive proprietary lease and stock in a corporation.
Cooperatives.
A cooperative, or co-op for short. Yes, 5 is E. Fee simple ownership of a living unit.
Fee simple.
Homeowners association.
No, fee simple reserve.
Condominium.
Yes, a condominium. Condominium. 3 is F. One condominium complex.
Homeowners association.
To which all will belong. Yes, 6 is G. Apartment house changed to condos. We call that
Conversion.
We call it a conversion. Correct. Money set aside for future repairs.
Reserve.
9 is I, reserved. Ownership for only part of a year.
Time sharing.
Time sharing, 10 is J. And regulations, regulates the creation of condominiums. What regulates the creation of condominiums?
Only left 7, Horizontal Property Act.
Yep, the state's Horizontal Properties Act, 7 is K. And that concludes chapter 7. Yeah.